Am I back? Am I back? That's the question. Hi, everybody. Welcome to an exciting new episode. Welcome to an exciting new Wing Commander stream adjacent to what once was All Wings Considered. I am LOAF, as you know, because the four people who are watching are the friends I already have. But yeah, I am going to pause for a couple minutes while we figure out if this is actually working. Because I am a stupid man who has no idea what he's doing. So let's just wait for Discord to kick in and tell me whether anyone can hear this, if the audio is okay, and if you're ready for a night of thrilling Wing Commander adventure that involves playing absolutely no games. It's the link. Oh, wait, he can't hear me. Let me share this link in chat. Chris Reed says audio isn't bad, so yeah, I guess we can take that as all we need. Okay, cool. Oh, it's got a YouTube chat built right into. OBS has a YouTube chat thing, so I can see what you're saying without. The future is amazing. Yeah, okay. So, how are you, everybody? I'm Loaf, and I have not streamed in about 3 years. There was this global pandemic thing going on, various other crises, and it just didn't seem like much fun. But I'm sure you all remember All Wings Considered, the most popular streaming show ever produced. Unfortunately, Jason Dunnerdahl McHale has gotten married and moved to the other side of the country and gotten a new job. So he can't be here to play off me. So it's just going to be me being awkward about Wing Commander forever. No, tonight I just kind of wanted to dip my toes back into this, figure out what I'm doing, learn OBS again, and I had this idea where I was going to go through the Confederation Handbook, the incredible manual for the Wing Commander movie, and just kind of like nerd out for some section of the book. This is one of those things where I'm like, oh, there's 131 pages. That'll be easy. And we'll get through like 5 of them after like 4 hours, and I'll give up. And we'll do this again, hopefully, if anyone cares. And yes, I need to learn, get my energy back. I'm excited, but, gotta get that rhythm going. I'm gonna turn off my fire GIF because I hate it. Yes, Spaceboy78 says great news about Jason. It is great news because when Jason moved here, he was down in the dumps. I mean, obviously you have to be pretty down in the dumps and having trouble in life to be on a Wing Commander streaming show, but he's doing amazing now. I think he's on a hike right now, but maybe he'll stop in later. And hopefully we'll be able to do All Wings Considered in the future with like segments from different people. Like obviously we want to get Chris Reed on the show. Anybody who wants to contribute really, because etc. Awesome AD says I have my digital copy ready. Yes. If you would like to follow along, I'll put the Confederation Handbook in that space right there so you can follow along. But if you'd like a digital copy, if you want it legal, you can check it out from the Internet Archive. If you want it convenient and genuinely hurts no one, Pixs's incredible Origin Archive has a nice scan copy, which is the one I'm going to be using, and you'll see because it has like a library card in it, and we can. Anyway, actually, I can show you. I set up one of these for my browser. A browser! Here's Pixs's website if you want your own PDF copy of the Confederation Handbook. It's actually under novels because it's kind of like a novel. So go down there, click on Confederation Handbook. Everything will be great. Make Chrome go away. All right, so how are y'all? What's going on in Wing Commander Town? I think there are more people already watching this than have ever watched an All Wings Considered episode, by which I mean there's like 5 people watching. So welcome! I'm sorry if this is going to end up being really boring. But let me bring up the Confederation Handbook, and we'll just talk a little bit about this incredible piece of art and my stunning love for it. Because if there's one piece of content that really goes well on the internet in 2023, it's being positive about something that no one else likes. So join me. There it is, and as you can see, this is Pixs Coffee with the Carson City Library stickers on it. So I have to own up to I have to give him credit for making this possible. I know there are people who talk about how incredible open source XYZ or archive mini nano bots on preservation or whatever are. I'm just making up things right now. But of all the accomplishments that have improved the Wing Commander fandom over the years, things like DOSBox and the GOG releases and so on, Hadrian disappearing, all the things that have made life better for everyone. One that absolutely deserves so much more credit than it gets is Pixs, Richard Pickles, and the fact that he went through and scanned every single manual and every single book, and he has them all up on his website, even if it's something that no one in history has ever had an interest in, like the Crusader hint book. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean Crusader. I meant Cybermage. If you want the Cybermage hint book, you can get it beautifully scanned, and it's thanks to Pixs and his completism. So if you don't know Pix's document collection, check it out. I'm going to get this right after 6 or 7 years. The Confederation Handbook is a book. Just great commentary already. It's working so well without somebody to play off of and make fun of me when I'm too excited or dumb. So the Confederation Handbook was called a, quote, movie book at the time, and in the late 90s, early 00s, this was part of the licensing package that companies, and HarperCollins specifically, would do when there's a big movie. They would get the rights to do the movie novelization. They would get the rights to do specifically two. It's two always. Two sequel books to whatever the movie is, and they would get to do what we would call a lore book today. They called it a movie book at the time, which is basically, it could be something like the Confederation Handbook, which was all in universe and talking about the world of Wing Commander. It could be an art book, or it could have been like the making of the film. Another one that went through exactly the same process of books was the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes, which had novelization of the movie, two sequel books, which are very hard to find these days. So if you're a Planet of the Apes person, go do that. And then like a making of book. And there were a couple of different movies around there that would essentially have this same basic package. Of course, Wing Commander. Oh, and they would always have a young adult novel also, which was an adaptation of the movie, which could either be an adaptation of the movie adaptation or a separate book by a different author based on the script. So for Wing Commander had the Confederation Handbook, which is their lore book, the movie novel by Peter Tellep. They commissioned two sequels, Pilgrim Stars and then Pilgrim Truth. Pilgrim Truth was never published. That's the whole story. If this is fun, maybe we'll read Pilgrim Truth someday because there's so many stories there also. And of course, there's the Wing Commander Jr. adaptation. But we're going to be talking about the Confederation Handbook today, and this is extra. It was just an extra special thing because it's kind of a bridge between the creative worlds of the movie and the games. So much of the movie stuff is made by people who didn't know the games or didn't care about the games. And I know all the trolls are like, yeah, you're right. They didn't care about the games. And that's not what I'm saying. But they did not know the world of the games. All the production stuff that happened in Luxembourg, all the labels in the background, the ranks, all the stuff that happened during production was done by a group that they weren't Wing Commander fans. They were professional movie people. And, at the end of the day, if you have the choice between the guy who did the sets for Titanic and the guy who really likes Wing Commander, you're going to go with the guy who did the sets for Titanic. But you see that all throughout the process in all these big things. They didn't get Bill Forstchen to do the novels, so they didn't have that voice for the novel. They got Peter Tellep, who is a super professional novelizer. He's somebody who can take a movie script and turn it into a 280-page novel like that, and it's very compelling, even if the script makes no sense. I'm not talking about Wing Commander, of course. I'm talking about Space Above and Beyond, maybe. But then if you're talking about Space Above and Beyond, aren't you also talking about Wing Commander? No, so this was an opportunity to have a group called Ink and Monkey God Productions lend some of what they did in the Wing Commander game world to the movie. Ink and Monkey Gods Productions was a spin-off company from Origin, started by David Ladyman, who a lot of folks who know Star Citizen knew David Ladyman. He did Jump Point for years, all sorts of important stuff for Star Citizen that is probably entirely forgotten now. But he was the master of publications at Origin from 1991 through the end of the series, and he did basically all the manuals, except claw marks. So he did Victory Streak, Voices of War, the ISIS manual, and Origin's Creative Services Department, which was the folks that did the packaging for the games. Packaging is the term in games that refers to everything in the box, all the physical stuff. They did the packaging, and then they did the marketing also. That whole group was world class. Before 1995-96, video game companies had a single, they had their internal, they did marketing internal. Flip through a bunch of CGWs. You're going to see all sorts of nerdy as hell advertisements before 1994. And then everybody starts using, gaming gets so big that you start using professional marketing companies. And it gets totally confusing because nobody has any idea what a game is or how to sell it. So it's like, a close-up of a bald guy and it says, Eric is going to eat your dinner, fight him in battle war. Or, it'll be like a lady taking her top off and it was like, even Battlecruiser 3000 is more exciting than this. And so nonsense, mainstream gamer bullshit. Can I swear on YouTube? I don't know. I'm sorry. I try to stay family friendly, but Allie has given me sort of I swear a lot more now. So I don't even know what I was talking about. Ink and Monkey God Productions was the group at Origin who would do all this stuff. They would do all the manuals. And, Electronic Arts actually kept them around longer than they would have normally because they were so good. And they tried to have Origin take over the marketing for other areas of the company. Origin started doing this publishing stuff for Bullfrog at one point because they didn't want to let these guys go. But as with a lot of Origin's incredibly talented, like super specific groups that were in-house, they had a world-class composer and a world-class sound booth and so on. EA, in its quest to save money, started saying, okay, you're going to contract, you don't work here anymore. We'll bring you in if we need a manual instead of having you here all the time. So they went and formed, there's a bunch of spin-off companies like this. Daylight Productions, Mark Day's company that did the Wing Commander, the Wing Commander 4 and Prophecy DVDs. Lion Entertainment was core people at Origin. They used to call it Origin University for a while because it would train world-class developers, and then EA was too stupid to keep them around. So they would go out and they would often start these kind of Origin spin-off companies, and IMGS was one of those. It was basically the guys who did all the Wing Commander manuals, but now in a separate company doing manuals for Origin and other companies. They did a whole lot of Prima guides at that time. I say Prima, but I mean all strategy guides. I think there were like 3 companies, and they worked on all of them. So this book, for all we're going to talk about continuity, and we're going to talk a lot about continuity, was done by the literal guys who did the Wing Commander manuals. The author credited here is Chris Mccubbin, who is... he's a fantastic guy, by the way. I'll tell a story about him in a minute. But he wrote all the sections in Victory Streak. He wrote stuff for Voices of War. This was edited by David Ladyman and, that whole group of people. Yeah. So Chris Mccubbin was, if you had to have someone writing Wing Commander manuals, this was the guy to do it. And like a lot of Origin guys, he was somebody from the tabletop gaming world. So much of Origin's initial culture and talent spins right off of Steve Jackson Games and folks who work there in Texas on just classic pen and paper games like Car Wars and Illuminati and whatever else Steve Jackson did and continues to do. It's funny. You'll see like My Brother Loves the Prisoner, and David Ladyman, the great David Ladyman, wrote a prisoner GURPS supplement, which you can still go ahead and get because it was wildly unpopular. But it's just cool seeing that. I love that crossover between the pen and paper world and Origin. It's just so much more interesting history than, hey, we went to a movie studio and gave a guy who's good at movies some money to produce something. That Texas tabletop game world is so... I love that. That's what makes Origin so compelling in my mind. So it's neat that there's all that lineage in this book. But of course, it is an adaptation of the Wing Commander movie, and we'll talk about what shape and so on it takes. But shout out to Chris Mccubbin, who has always been incredibly nice to me since I was an obnoxious teen. My good friend Chris Reed, who, I wasn't even looking at chat. I'm so bad at live streaming. Hi everybody in chat. Hi Galaxy Stranger. Hi Silky. Lots of names I am familiar with. Hi Shingo. It's great to see you all. Hi Barry. Sorry I'm talking about an old movie book all night. Chris Mccubbin was always so nice to me. When Chris Reed and I got invited to go see the Austin premiere of the Wing Commander movie, we sat right in front of Chris, and we up on the balcony at the Paramount Theater in Austin, and we of course fanboyed out. This was like our hero, We from the beginning had that reaction to anybody who worked at Origin, like, oh my God, that celebrity. The thing I couldn't believe people did to me when I worked at Star Citizen, because I was just a regular guy, but we kind of did that to game developers before it was even a thing at all. So we would, fanboy out. And of course, the guy who actually wrote our lore, everybody talks about, I want to meet this actor or this director. Like, I want to meet the guys who write the lore. They're the ones who are doing the stuff that sticks with me. So we totally fanboyed out to Chris Mccubbin and his wife at the movie premiere, and he said, give me a call, we'll hang out before you guys go. I should point out I was 16 or 17 years old at the time, and terrified of everything that was happening around me. I have a perfect memory of this whole night in my head because I was so nervous the whole time. But we somehow worked up the courage, and I suspect I made Chris Reed do it, to call Chris and his wife, and they took us to get some real Texas barbecue, which is something that anyone in Austin does when an outsider comes in, and just talk nerd stuff all night long. And it was so cool. They were just the best people in the world. In fact, I actually have, where's my browser? Let me turn off the handbook for just a second. I thought ahead, and I have the browser thing, and I actually have a picture from that night. So that's Chris on the left, Chris Reed on the right. God, we're so young. Even when I'm young, though, I look like a middle-aged lesbian, which is something my wife tells me a lot. But just good guys. They've always been so kind to me. I guess I can describe it that Chris Mccubbin is one of those guys who will wish you a happy birthday on Facebook no matter what. Even after you long ago turned off your ability to remind, you turned off the reminder to people. You don't read your birthday messages. You don't reply to them anymore. But he is always there with a nice message for your birthday. He's just a solid, good guy. And of course, because he was responsible for so much of Wing Commander continuity, a true genius. So let me bring back the Confederation Handbook, and let's see what is happening. Oh, Shingo says he's saying hello. He's going to be lurking at work because that's what adults do at work. I agree. I once got in trouble for a job about 15 years ago for doing too much internet. I'll tell that story some other time. Now, let's look at this cover because... Chris Mccubbin is still there. Let's look... Oh, no. I'm looking at my screen rather than yours because I'm an idiot. Let's see... Oh, and someone is adding me on Discord. What is happening there? General says, everything looks good overall, but light is off. Yes, it is super effing hot in here, so I left the studio light off, so the lighting is bad for me. I will get that working eventually. In fact, I actually bought one of these stupid, not stupid, it's going to solve all my problems, one of these ring lights. I have not plugged it in or figured it out, and if I get on the floor right now, I'm not getting up again. So we're gonna make do with this little band. And the important thing is the handbook. So look at that instead of me. Oh, and if you are watching this somehow not on Discord or in YouTube chat, I'll take questions from those places as best I can remember to. And I see people are going ahead of me and talking about the pictures on the handbook already in chat. AD says the press photos are pretty standard. You see them show up all the time. And yes, the little photos there are the ones you see at like the other countries just still do lobby cards. They're the basic Wing Commander press photos. But as he says, there is a hint in there about a deleted scene, so we can talk about that. I should note again, this is based again on the everything in the handbook is based on the shooting script of the Wing Commander movie, because it had to go to press months and months before. Just like the novelization, it had to go to press months before the print was actually done, and so you're going to see hints about the stuff to explain stuff that doesn't even end up in the movie, and you're going to see stuff that is in the movie, like the reference to Hornets, stuff that got added at the very last minute that's not referenced in here. So this is it's another one of those. I love to think of tie-in media as capturing something in amber at one particular place. The Star Trek Starfleet chronology from 1979 matches nothing we know about Star Trek today, but it's this perfect little source for how people imagined Star Trek's history in 1979. So this is how people imagined the Wing Commander movie in November 1998, and that aspect fascinates me. So yeah, the stills you see here, and the one 80 is talking about is the lower. I don't have a way to point to it necessarily. I should have thought of that. It is the lower one, and the one where there's two, which is Admiral Wilson in his pilgrim outfit, which of course got an action figure. It was a major part of the plot of the movie, and it just got entirely cut out, which was that the Confederation admiral who ran the space station, the Pegasus station at the start of the movie, ends up being a traitor, and that got removed from the movie entirely, but that one still keeps showing up, and so much of the movie tie-in material still involves it, because it's basically it's basically making Star Wars, and then Marshall Lucas is like, let's cut this Darth Vader guy. We're not going to have him anymore. And Kenner already made 5,000 toys. And obviously, I know that's famously exactly the opposite of how Kenner worked. They made no toys, but that's neither here nor there. So it was basically cutting the identifiable villain from the movie, but he still showed up in shots like that. So there's that on the cover. There's a nice shot of the nice set photo of one of the Kilrathi in the best kind of pose they could do, which was face turned away from the camera. You got rapiers from an action sequence. You've got the squadron gathering around for their briefing. You've got the Marines lined up on the Diligent. Classic Wing Commander movie imagery for the 7 people who consider the Wing Commander movie to be incredibly classic, which is me. I joke about this. I talk about, it's a terrible movie, blah, blah, blah. I love the Wing Commander movie, and I will fight you. I will fight you about this. Yeah. So, those photos, but the center photo is the most interesting to me. It is Blair on the ComCom, and you have seen that picture before, and there's a reason you've seen that picture before. Because they didn't have the poster ready when they were doing the tie-in stuff. Fox kept promising digital envelope, we'll have it signed off soon, we'll have it signed off soon. Chris and the team made an incredible poster with a Kilrathi face fading into a battle scene with the rapiers. It looked incredible. They said, no, we don't want to use that, we're going to do our own. And of course, you've all seen the final Wing Commander movie, giant head of Freddie Prinze Jr. and Angel and Maniac poster. That's fine. But it was not ready in time for HarperCollins, or HarperEntertainment specifically, which is the imprint that did these books. It was not time for them to. There was not time for them to actually use the movie poster on the books, which had to be printed months earlier. We'll hear that a bunch in this. So that is why you had this very specific branding with the Wing Commander logo there, which is in the bottom left corner. That was basically the production team, the movie production team in Luxembourg's logo. They used it on the jackets and publications and so on. So that's where they sourced that. There's that logo, which I love, with the blocky letters. It's very much trying to give the Wing Commander movie an identity similar to the way that the stop font variant did for the games. But so that shows up in all the previous stuff, and the picture of Blair on the ship, despite the fact that his scene basically gets shredded, and it's the most embarrassing part of the movie, where the climax goes from a cool knife fight and a battle to some fast shots of Blair from different scenes edited together. So that got to be on the cover of the covers of the novels. It got to be the cover of the handbook. It got to be all over the action figures. Just came from anywhere. The other thing I want to point out is the text. In fact, I remember David Ladyman, or maybe it was Chris. David, no, it was David. He told me that everything in the book was done by AMGS except this cover. This cover was done by Harper in New York. And we should look at some of the text here because it seems like a normal thing. I have looked at this book every day for the last 24 years, and you don't even see it. But to the top, for use in 2653 to 2654 Ulysses Corridor classified. That's fine. That speaks to what is in the book, basically, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the call-outs here on the side are really odd. Let's run through them. Spacecraft, yeah, we've got drones fighting spacecraft in there. Weaponry, yeah, there's an article about the marine weaponry. Badges, there's a page with pictures of nose art, so I guess that's badges. Uniforms, I think that's the marine, the marine combat armor stuff. There's a section about what the different pieces of the marine combat armor. Patches, not sure that's any different than badges, but ship stats, again, that's with spacecraft. Flight tactics, I don't think there are flight tactics. A regular Wing Commander manual would have flight tactics. I don't believe this does. Pilot profiles, yes. TCN timeline, really. There's an article about the history of the Confederation. It's not a Navy timeline. Karathi language, no. There's not an article about Karathi language. There's an article about Karathi culture, and there's some images of the font they use in the movie, but we don't get a language article. Shield specs. What are shield specs? The ship stats we mentioned earlier have shield specs. It'll say, like, the Rapier has a 5-centimeter shield. I don't know why that's worthy of a call-out on the front of the book, but this is a particular juncture that I always love thinking about media books, is where I kind of touched this earlier, where the totally unrelated editor touches the massive nerd stuff and tries to figure it out. I had this one job where we just had somebody who had no idea what they were doing in charge, and they were like, what's going to be in your game? And somebody said, our ships are going to have turrets, and the word turret bored into that head, and it was everything in marketing. Let's have a turret. Let's talk about turrets. And like, this word got through your brain somehow. The really Shield Spec did the same thing. Some editor in New York City was like, "Wow, this is so detailed. This is what the specs for the shields are." No one seeing the movie cares what the specs for the shields are. I don't care what the specs of the shields are. That's a lie. But the funniest part of this cover, and we will actually change the page in just a second after I say this, is this giant call at the bottom that's complete and comprehensive. It is complete and comprehensive. It's a very cool book. And even a larger font includes Confederation Oath of Service. There is a Confederation Oath of Service. It was specifically written by these people. It is a terrible poem that appears in Victory Streak and Voices of War. It is not in this book. There is no Confederation Oath of Service anywhere in this book. Is it possible it was at some point and got cut out because maybe, I don't know, it was a legal thing because Origin had already published it? I don't know. But it certainly is not in the version of this book that was published, and there's not an especially good place for it either. So it's not clear what that is. It's possible somebody, some editor took that from an outline of the book, or I don't know. But I have always laughed at that. I think we made it through one page. Let me see. Somebody asked in chat about Adam Foshko and Mark Day. Adam Foshko stayed with Origin through Secret Ops. Mark Day left shortly after Prophecy to start Daylight. And he picked up some really good employees, folks like George Oldzier, and they did some really good DVD conversions. But Adam Foshko was still there through Secret Ops. I think he left sometime after that. May have started on, I'm sure he did start on Wing Online and the various versions of that. I also want to talk about my, just briefly, my personal history with this book, where I was when I first read this book. Um, Obviously, a bunch of the guys in chat remember this. Chris Reed, probably Leha, and everybody. We were all in IRC back then, and we were so excited. They were publishing a. It's essentially the manual for the movie. It's just glorious Wing Commander lore that could interest no one but us. So we were so excited about this book. And of course, we were angry teenagers, so we were so excited about arguing about this book, because if there's one thing dumb teenagers love, it's arguing about the continuity in Wing Commander, which we did very unpleasantly for very many years. We could talk about that later also. So we were so excited about this. This was just the very, very early days of being able to buy books online. And I think I had this pre-ordered from Borders and Barnes & Noble and Amazon. And I had a call out to like every independent bookstore in my area. Like, once you get in the Wing Commander movie stuff, give me a call. And so sometime in February, well before we heard about it from anywhere, well before it was in stock at Amazon or anywhere else, I got a call from an indie bookstore in DC, which my head is telling me is politics and prose, but that may just be because the rest of this story. And it was like 6 p.m. on a Tuesday or some school night. I was still in high school, and I did not drive. I still don't drive, but I begged my mom, I need this book before the rest of the Wing Commander community. I need to be the guy who goes and tells Chris Reed and Ace and everybody what's in here. Please, please, please take me downtown, which would have been a nightmare at the time. It would have taken 90 minutes to drive down to DC from where we lived. But to her credit and her endless credit, my mom said, of course I'll take you down to an independent bookstore in downtown DC on a school/work night. Why wouldn't I? So we went down there, and we got there and parked outside, on the street, and then there were police who said, "You can't get out of your car. You have to stay right there." It turned out that in the cafe or the restaurant right next to the bookstore, the first lady, who was Hillary Clinton at the time, had shown up for some sort of event, and they had closed down the block. Secret Service wasn't letting anyone in. We could not go into the bookstore, so our options were just to leave and go home or wait. And again, to my mom's credit, we waited for like 2 hours while Hillary Clinton fundraised, and I just got angrier and angrier waiting for my damn book. But the moment we were allowed to go in, I rushed in there, got the book. I still remember it was, one of those, I'm just describing a bookstore, who cares? But yeah, they handed me the book. I sat in the car and I glued myself to it, and I had 5,000 things to say on IRC that night. So that's why I never really liked Hillary Clinton after that. No, she was fine. I have no problem with Hillary Clinton, but it delayed my getting the Confed Handbook. And you don't forget a thing like that. Yes, as Chris Reed just pointed out in chat, even if you were supposed to include, even if this had the Confederation Oath of Service, which again is a very poorly written poem, that is oddly specific to being a wingman instead of just being in part of a giant space war, which should, 99.999% of soldiers should not be pilots. Why would anyone care if it had the Confederation? Why is that the biggest thing? Ooh, I wasn't going to buy this book, but it has the Confederation Oath of Service. Okay, I'm going to go to the next page because we're never going to get to the next page if I don't start doing this. This one can be fast. Yeah, nothing here. The book was $19.95, which was exactly how much a book this size cost in 1999. Oh, Harper Prism is the imprint here. HarperEntertainment did the novels. That sort of thing means a lot to people that sell books. It means absolutely nothing to anyone else. Technically, Harper Prism and HarperEntertainment don't exist anymore. HarperCollins does. It's probably part of some other book. It's part of. I think there's like 2 publishers now. My sister works in that world, and she would understand all this. I do not. All right, the first page, and again, this is a library copy from Pixs' website. So there is a due date slapped right on top of the artwork, but. let's look at the frontispiece anyway. And for the purposes of archive, I will point out that a couple years ago, David Ladyman sent me the source files. I think they're Quark files for this book if we ever wanted to recreate it. But we also have all the individual bits of artwork in their original resolutions, which are not high compared to anything today. But it's cool to go back and look at this stuff. You know, if we want to put this picture on the internet, we can, because we have the highest possible resolution one. In fact, I just did that a couple days ago for a little thread about this book, which is Blair's. This is the prop book that Blair is reading in the first scene where he appears in the movie. It's a copy of the Odyssey. I did a little thread on Twitter about figuring out which translation it is and all that. So check that out if you really want to know. But that's his cross prop. Right behind the sticker there is a CD case that is like classified information. It's supposed to be the contents of this book. So I can talk about the gimmick of the book now. One thing Wing Commander always did that was really cool was with the tie-in stuff, they would come up with some in-universe gimmick. You know, Claw Marks isn't some stuff about Wing Commander. It's the manual of the TCS Tigers. It's the monthly magazine of the Tiger's Claw, and everything is lensed through that to tell you about how to play the game. So instead of, these are your enemies, this is Jones fighting ships for the Vega sector, and here are the specs. It's all the in-universe. And they did that throughout the series. The Kilrathi Saga booklet is Blair's scrapbook. The Victory Streak is a AI-generated magazine that introduces you to the Victory, new pilots to the Victory. The ISIS manual is some of your email exchanges, and so on and so forth. So they continued that tradition here. And it is super 1999 because the idea here is not that it is a book you're reading in the Wing Commander universe. It's a web browser. And we'll see that every page has a browser header with a forward, back, stop button, just like browsers, just like whatever browser they would have had at the time, which was probably Netscape and IE at the time. So it's a web browser, and the conceit is that it is Blair's character reading news and gradually hacking into more and more classified information until he's finally reading Admiral Tolvan's top secret correspondence at the end. So we'll see that as we go through this. So this is theoretically the mini disc player that has all these websites on it, and you can see at the bottom right it's still visible, even though the sticker is there. It is the IMGS logo, so it's canon. That is Blair's actual name tag and dog tag from the movie. So that's a cool thing to look at more closely if you're recreating a prop. And it confirms that the on-set rank for him was just lieutenant. The ranks in the movie are an oft-debated thing. We won't talk about them much tonight, but a lot of people like to go on about... people like to argue about it compared to the games. They use Navy ranks in the movie, which makes more sense in a world, makes people who play the games and got to be colonels angry. And, if you'd done 2 more movies, that would have been a problem, because I do feel like Colonel Blair is a particular part of the IP, and when you start off with a movie rank, you're not going to get there. That's not a problem that was ever an actual issue, though. So, movie ranks, the one that bugs me, that actually does bug me, that I'll complain about, which is why I point out the lieutenant, is that in the dialogue of the movie, Blair is both referred to as a lieutenant junior grade, I think by himself, and then Tolman calls him a first lieutenant, and those are opposite sides of that chasm. So that one sticks out when I watch the movie. What else do we have here? I also like the date, 1998.271. I'm sure that was when this book went to press, but it's cool that it's in the Wing Commander dating system. And when I do a Wing Commander timeline, I would absolutely include that probably as the first date, even though it would break the usual rules. In fact, let me show you why I started to do this in the first place. I was going to go through and show you how I edit a spreadsheet while I do this, because I'm working on a new Wing Commander timeline that's going to be more comprehensive and hopefully more thoughtful. And I was like, I want to go through this and pull out notes from the handbook. I think I'm just going to go through it and talk, and then I'll look at the transcript later to type everything up, so you don't have to watch me do that. But I will show you the spreadsheet itself, which I'm working on. Hopefully you can see this here. Yeah. So it's basically just a Google Docs spreadsheet, and I've been slowly putting in all these events from different sources, and the sources are all listed here. So, that's claw marks, Karathi Saga. It's got dates from the Karathi Saga calendar, from the Karathi Saga manual, claw marks. Each different color is a different type of thing. I think the light greens are dates from the Karathi Saga calendar. The sort of red wine Volvo color things are just events that are referenced somewhere, and it goes on. So. Here's USG. These are book. The yellows are book chapters. So I took every single chapter of the strategy guide, blah blah blah. The individual acts of the Academy episodes and so on. These are individual shots from the movie paired with the chapters from the movie novelization and the junior novelization. Basically, taking every story, figuring out what it references, and then the body of the story itself, turning it into chunks that can be arranged in a spreadsheet or a flowchart. And we can figure out how everything goes together. And, it's never going to be perfect, but it's just so fun and such a cool distraction from the horrors of the world. And I have the time of my life just doing this. And you find neat stuff that you could use to tell a story later. For instance, like right in the middle of the movie stuff, like 2 days after the movie, they announced the discovery of the double helix aliens, which is one of the first things in claw marks. You can sync up the dates and that. So the story of the movie might not even have been like the front page news. Failed Karathi attack might not have been the front page news in the Confederation in March 2654. And it's fun to see stuff like that. And to figure out where it doesn't quite go and why not. I love that stuff. And this was the core of it. I listed out all the individual missions of the game. There's all sorts of information about them. When the Bible says they happen, what system they happen in, who the wingman was canonically, who it is in the guide, where it changes from the game. I've got all that noted. It's fun stuff. But I've got the structure of all the Wing Commander 1 missions, all the Wing Commander special secret missions, Super Wing Commander. It's all in there, and it all meshes together. We got Wing 1 and Wing 2. This is originally going to be just a secret mission script to figure out how a secret missions timeline to figure out how Freedom Flight jives in with the novel. But it's getting bigger and crazier. And Wing Commander 3 will be down here at the bottom. The forward and stuff for the strategy guide, which takes place 50 years after Wing Commander 1, gets to be at the end. And it's going to form a beautiful soup. It's got like 700 entries now, and it's going to have hundreds and hundreds more. So, and if anybody's interested in working on something like this, I would be happy to anybody wants to be on Discord and just throw back timeline stuff, I'll give you access to the doc. We can all work on it together. It's fun stuff. Hit me up. We'll talk timelines. All right. Everything's still okay with technology, audio, and so on. Handbook. Let's read the handbook finally. How many hours have I been doing this already? 42 minutes. Wow, they shouldn't let me on internet. Okay. Let us load up the future internet and go through it. By the way, this idea of a future internet, I have to, there's no credit here, but I have to give credit to Dan Finkelstein from Dan's Wing Commander movie site. Chris Roberts had him out to Digital Anvil in 1998 to pitch a website for the Wing Commander movie, which didn't work out. They didn't end up going with it, but his pitch was, it should be the Tiger's Claws browser, and it's all the information about the movie is through that. And he did a mock-up, which we have online at the CIC. It's really fun stuff. And if it's either a coincidence that this is the same idea or it's not. So I think he needs some credit there. So again, this is just the copyright stuff for the book that has been put into quasi-continuity. So it's obviously all legally required stuff. Harper's Collins, copyright, so on. If you purchase this book without a cover. By the way, where does that come from? What is the world where people are constantly buying books without covers? You see that disclaimer in everything, and I have never seen someone try to sell me a book without a cover. And I buy a lot of books. I also can't imagine wanting to buy a book without a cover. But it's they have that warning everywhere. Anybody out there in publishing? Let me know. Hi, Boom Boom. Thanks for coming in. Hi, Maria. Good to see you. Oh, right. Chris Reed points out that I didn't have my copy to get signed by Chris Mccubbin. We had to get another one. I actually don't remember that part of the story, so if you tell it in chat, I will read it out loud, and it will fresh in my memory. I think my brain shut down the day after we saw the movie. Anyway, this page on the right, it's the usual legal stuff. None of this is canon. That doesn't go in the timeline. But then on the left, we have it's like watching a movie. It's linear storytelling in nonlinear form. It's literally loading up the computer he's using, and putting in the security chip, and it's like starting the game where they would have something like this. So it literally has all this background that means nothing to you at this point about top secret files and so on. But it's this great nerdy setup. Here at the top you've got he's apparently reading this on whatever an M14 TCN5 portable data reader unit is. And that's just the background color I love. That's the stuff I want in a Wikipedia. And I want somebody doing a production 50 years to say, oh, he uses a pad in this scene of the Wing Commander 4 reboot. Let's call it the M14 TCN7 to go with it. I love those details. And at the risk of sounding contradictory to everyone on the internet, I love when they're wrong. I love when they're contradictory and when you get to notice that and figure out why. I love all that stuff. So. But, hey, we've got 24 files and sub-files we're going to be reading. There's confidential ones, top secret. Let's go to it. And the disc content, this is what was on that disc we just saw. We're not reading a book. We're entering the cheapest immersive sim in the world. Yeah, so it's just like, and look here, you even have it interactive at the top. He has to type in yes to start reading the book. And that's stupid cool to me. And, this is all the stuff we're going to see. I love fake computer systems in games, and I love figuring those out. Like, the Quine 4000 and what its interface is like. This is CDataNet, a network of the Confederation Armed Services, which fits just with Clawmarks, by the way. Clawmarks had there's Confed ReadyNet in one of the PlayStation ports. This all just goes together really great, and it just seems just like what you would expect from a future data network imagined in like 1989. And again, here we see all these folks whose names you will see all over Origin stuff. Chris Mccubbin, Melissa Tyler, Sharon Freilich, Jennifer Soferer, Tuesday Phrase, David Ladyman. I think we met most of them at the premiere, and they were all just super nice. They were our absolute heroes. Thanks also. The Scientific Illustrator, we'll see some of their work. Etienne Braun was the set photographer in Luxembourg. Another really incredibly nice guy. He's actually the guy who got me my tattoo. I wanted the tattoo of Paladin's tattoo from the movie that you don't see on screen. All the scenes were cut. And I looked for years and years and years, and I could just get little blurry captures from rough work prints and things. And finally, I reached out to Etienne Braun and said, do you have any photos of it? And 5 minutes later, he had a clear shot of Checky Cario's neck. So that's how I got a tattoo. But again, good guy. And Chris Roberts, you all know Chris Roberts. All the usual producers for the movie, which we recognize from the credits. Martin Davies, who had been head of Origin's marketing or sales for years, and then was president of Digital Amble at this time. Licensing stuff, blah blah blah, and there's Peter Telef, historian, as the guy who wrote the Wing Commander movie novel. Another cute touch, and like the similar credit box and Clawmarks, I think these are all people in the universe of Wing Commander. They count these as Tuckerizations rather than something out of continuity like that first page. And look there at the top, you can see it's a fake web browser. It's cheap as hell, and it doesn't look like a web browser today, but search, previous, next, reload, save, print, quit. That's how we're working this book. And again, I have all these files. If somebody wants to make like a skin for Chrome or something that is this, please do. I will give you any file you want because that would be stupid fun. Also note that this section is in full color. This book is not in full color. That's probably why we didn't get a call out in the front about being in full color. But they made a very interesting choice for how it would work. They were basically said you can have 50% of the book in color, design it that way. You could alternate, or usually you would alternate. You would have sections of text and then pages of graphics, particularly in like a making of book. You could go for 10 pages of just black and white text and then have a colorful graphic, an insert section. They said, let's try something different, which I have never seen in a book before. I'm sure it's not original, but I've never seen it in a book before, where the first half of the book is in full color and the second half is black and white. So we'll get to a point where it's just suddenly no longer in color. And again, a cool restoration project for somebody would be to restore the rest of it to color, because it's all sourced from, Hubble imagery and set photos and so on that we could theoretically find. So if anybody ever wanted to do that, they could. Okay, now let's actually start reading the book. Oh, and I pointed out this the other day in chat. I pointed out this the other day in chat as we were talking about, classified files are in the news big time right now. What the president knows and when he knows it, and what he can do with his documents. We won't go into any of that because it's all idiotic. But this is a really good primer for different classification levels, because it is organized roughly like how actual military classification works, with unclassified stuff, confidential, secret, and then top secret. So, I don't know, you can learn something about real life, I guess, but who wants that? All right. Okay. Page 1. Each of the sections of the book has these basically index pages that are theoretically, you're supposed to click on the one to see the article you want. Somebody should make an interactive version of this book, by the way. It wouldn't be too hard to turn this into a website. But you can view or store or delete each one. It doesn't actually do anything because it's a physical printed book. But the idea is we're reading I've said this so many times. We're reading a web browser, and this is the index. So it has one of these 2-page indexes for each type of classification. This is the unclassified stuff, just random articles Blair is reading on the Tiger's Claw's internet. Or maybe this is before he gets to the Tiger's Claw. I'm not sure. Was there a reference for the Tiger's Claw already? No, I think he's like at the academy reading this, or on this Diligent or something. Yeah, we have this 90s tech style thing at the top that shows us classification and how my security chip is working and so on. And again, that's all environmental storytelling. You can go through this and you can figure out how a Confederation security chip works and when he puts it in and out of the TCN5 data reader. And we should do that because it's interesting. But it's just interesting that they thought it all up. So here's our index of all the stuff we're about to see. An interview with Admiral Tolwyn, the history of the Confederation-Karathi War, so on. Let's check it out. Here's the second page of that. Okay. So yeah, let's look at these articles. I'm going to say this about every single one, but this is a favorite. This is the interview with the Admiral Tolwyn character. You all know Admiral Tolwyn. We have a lot of room for debate about continuity because he's clearly an admiral here, and he's a Commodore in the Academy animated series. He's also an admiral in all the Wing Commander 1 and 2 stuff that's referenced around here. In Secret Missions 2, he's Vice Admiral Tolwyn. He's not Commodore Tolwyn. So it doesn't quite match the animated series. There's reasons why it could in the story. There's reasons why it shouldn't, and so on. But he's Admiral Tolwyn here. We're going to go with that. We're going to call him Admiral Tolwyn. We're going to treat his character as older rather than the younger character of Action Stations, which has actually just been published around when this came, just before this came out. So I guess it seemed extra big that he wasn't. His rank was weird. But this is basically a... They do it not as, hey, here's this character telling us about what's in the movie. It's did anybody remember getting the Sunday supplement with a newspaper back in the day? You would get like Parade magazine, and it was trashy as hell. It would have like a celebrity gossip section and advertisements for collectible plates. Just that kind of a cheap ass Sunday trash magazine that people ate up in the 80s and maybe early 90s. It's a parody of that, which they call Jubilee here. I think of it as Parade magazine, but it's the same idea. So it's this pop, censored, cleaned up, rah-rah propaganda interview with Admiral Tolwyn. Of course, that's a headshot of David Warner taken on the set of the movie. And then you do a logo for Jubilee, so it feels like one of those trashy newspaper supplements. And just even stuff like the name of the senior editor is Davis Davis. That's such a stupid name, but it's a story right there because this is some figure, some character in the Wing Commander universe who, oh, he's so famous and popular. They call him Davis Davis, and they put up with that inane crap. And you can imagine exactly the kind of writer who would have that as their byline today. Um, so this is a really good article. It is set on. It sets up that Admiral Tolwyn is on Titan. So this is about a month before the movie. He's there for a strategic planning meeting, and he's meeting with other leaders of the war on headquarters on Titan, and they catch him for this interview, and they talk about the Concordia and give you a little bit of the political background. He has to brief the Joint Chiefs in the Senate about what's going on. Great world building. And you can imagine this in 1950, somebody interviewing MacArthur, and he's gonna, and it really is that, because it's that same, like, he's gonna slip and tell us he wants to nuke Korea, which they both did want to do. So it's a great article interviewing Tolwyn. It's a fluff piece. It's literally a fluff piece. Here then again you can see what they have to do with. Oh, I do have a pointer. Okay. How they do the all the art. It's totally taken from movie frames and stills and things. This is him looking at the ring from the end of the movie, which of course could not actually have been taken before 2654.073. So it's 30. The picture appears 30 days before it actually happened. Hope somebody got fired for that one. No. I love looking at this and knowing how they put it together. I did the same thing for the manual I worked on, Star Soldier for EA. Basically, we had no budget for art, so we took whatever we could from the archives, and that's what we have here. And it's just this great prose level for this sort of thing. The Admiral is not a tall man, slender and compact. He seems designed by evolution for the narrow corridors and low hatches of a starship. You could read it in that World War II propaganda video. You could read this, and it sounds like a short film, one of those propaganda films, the newsreel. It sounds like a newsreel. See, if Jason were here, he could be telling me all about newsreels right now. And he probably would have stopped me from talking an hour ago. So it's great stuff about the history of Tolwyn. One thing I love about the continuity in this book is they pick the weirdest universities for everybody. Sometimes you read something and you're like, okay, everybody went to the Starfleet Academy. That's boring. And Wing Commander is guilty of that in so many times. Everybody went to the Terran Confederation Space Naval Academy. Well, they obviously didn't, because you've established that you graduate 200 pilots from the Academy a year, and that hundreds of pilots are being killed every day in the Gemini sector. There's balance there. There's obviously thousands of universities and ROTC programs and other academies and training schools and so on that are turning out soldiers and officers, not to mention, non-commissioned folks and blah, blah, blah. So I like when somebody goes a different direction, and a lot of times that direction is, I'm going to reference schools that are personally connected to me. And you see that in Wing Commander too, like in the movie novel. There's a couple references to the University of Southern Florida, which becomes a pilgrim concentration camp, a concentration camp for pilgrims in the book. And that's Peter Tell putting the university that he works at in the story. I am certainly guilty of putting the University of Texas, Hookham, in Star Citizen and similar places. But these guys took it a different direction, which was pick weird, it's this Star Trek style. Everything is diverse, and the future is totally different from now world. So it's not a bunch of American schools. Admiral Tolwyn went to the University of Reykjavik in Iceland. It's a solar university in Reykjavik, and Paladin went to the University of Cairo. There's just a bunch of really worldly education system content in this particular source, which. You add that to that big mix I'm making in the spreadsheet, and you sprinkle it in, and suddenly you don't have everybody in the academy. You have all sorts of different history, and it makes for a better world. And when somebody wants to look at the wiki in 20 years and say, where did my character go to school? They can say, oh, it's Solar University of Reykjavik. Couple other notes from this text here, which you've probably already had time to read several times. His doctor's in hyperphysics. I am pretty sure that's a reference to Chris Roberts himself, who was pursuing a degree in physics before discovering that you could make a whole lot of money in video games. Um, so, yeah. And a great tall one backstory. Go only 3 generations back, you'll find 4 admirals, 1 general, and 3 senators. Very similar to the tall one backstory you get everywhere else, where he's a military family and dedicated to service and so on. One of the references here is that burns everybody's cannoli is that he earned his first star before his 40th birthday as an engineer in the first Grand Fleet. Note the capitalization of Grand Fleet. We'll be talking about that later. But we have this idea that he's older than 40 as implied, which of course does not fit with action stations. And, there's enough weasel word there that if you absolutely want to convince yourself this means something else, you can. What is his first star? Is it his first star as an admiral, or is it his first medal? And technically it doesn't say it's 40. It says he's earned it before he was 40. So, yeah, so on. But here's what we're going to see come out in a lot of the continuity stuff here, which is... and, most of this matches Tall One's backstory first. Rises to his current post in the command upheavals of 46. But then he's the 3rd most senior officer in the Navy. That doesn't quite match action stations. So back and forth. But what we're going to see here is the challenge that the guys doing this book had was working in the Pilgrim War. I'll save until we get to the Pilgrim War timeline to talk about what that challenge was and why it took the shape it did here, which confused a lot of people at the time, because there's nothing in the movie necessarily that says the Pilgrim War has to have been so recent. And in fact, there's stuff that implies that it should have been further back in the timeline. But there is stuff in the shooting script of the movie that ends up getting removed that does very clearly specify that Tall One had to have been commanding in the Pilgrim War and so on. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. More Tall One interview. Incredible render of the ship there. Of course, Wing Commander, Wing Commander famously went right to the final minute. Like folks, people working on Dune, they went right to the last minute mining spice with the CGI. The CGI workload for the movie was a lot more than they expected would need to be done, and they had multiple outsourcers working up to the last minute and beyond, getting shots right. Which we'll see in this, because none of the effects shots in this are finished, and that's particularly important for the ships we're going to see. But this is a great image where they've taken a bit of Hubble photography and they've put an early render of the Concordia on there, and it's a mighty ship. If you aren't impressed by the Concordia, the cool battleship in space, this and the Yamato get away with being a battleship in space and it being okay. So. Concordia, good. I hope you're getting that from this. Getting this from this live stream. I also noticed a little Tucker right here. The dust farms of McLean. You're gonna see you'll see McLean on the Wing Commander Universe map. Also, it is a reference to an Origin producer, John McLean, another good guy with plenty of Wing Commander experience. I got to chat with him for a while a couple years ago when I was searching for information about. Wing 2 SNES. Still missing. If you, one of the, what are there, like 2 people watching, if you have the unreleased version of Wing Commander 2 for the Super Nintendo, let us know. Okay. What? Okay, here. There is an awesome Admiral Tallwin speech that I quote a lot, and I'm going to read it here because it's great. Where is this? Is it? Oh, it's the next page, maybe. Yes. One more popular supposition needs to be answered. What about the systems at the front? Many of them are still active civilian colonies. When the Karathi invasion comes, will they be abandoned like the frontier colonies in the early days of the Pilgrim War? This question does draw a more impassioned response. Never! I was... I shouldn't do an accent because I'm terrible at it. Never. And he didn't have an accent in the movie. He was an American-style fighting admiral. Okay, never mind. I was there when we retook those worlds, and I saw what was left. We will not abandon a single... Suddenly, the warrior remembers that he is also a politician. He takes a deep breath and chooses his words with care. I don't wish to give the impression that I am criticizing the men who created the strategy of the last war. I understand why they had to do what they did. I'm just grateful that I didn't have to make their choice. Nevertheless, he continues, the fire rekindling in his face, humanity now faces a far crueler foe than even the most fanatical pilgrim. Retreat is not an option. I will never willingly surrender a single civilian colony to the Kilrathi. If we stand firm, the enemy will break himself upon the wall of our shields. If one fortress falls, the Emperor will find another equally strong fortress behind it. There will be losses, and I fear they will be terrible. But there can be, no retreat. Humanity will stand, or we will die. Those are the only options which our enemy has given us. I'm here to see that we do stand, not just today and tomorrow, but forever. And never thief, nor tyrant, nor petty alien god shall ever cast us down. That's awesome pulp! That's so good. You could see Admiral Tolwyn giving that speech in Fleet Action. And for all the nagging details about his lore history, this is so perfectly Admiral Tolwyn, and it's a cool, inspirational Wing Commander speech. It's so similar to the "By God, Baron, if it takes 1,000 years, we'll be back. 100 years, we'll be back" from Fleet Action. One of those great fake political rah-rah speeches goes up there with ID4. That generation that came of age in the 90s really bought into that. We've learned better now, but man, it was good while it lasted. The other great thing of this page, I'm sure you've already seen, is the fake banner ads. This isn't what banner ads look like anymore. Banner ads, are they even a thing anymore? I don't know. I've had ad block on for years. I think everyone has. If banner ads still exist, no one knows. But they did about half a dozen different 1990s style banner ads for Wing Commander stuff. And this is a great one. Durasteel bomb shelters. How great is setting up your world building is that? Selling bomb shelters. And of course Durasteel, another one of those deep Wing Commander cuts. And even the little composite image is great with battleships out the window of the Durasteel bomb shelter. My experience would be not to put a window in a bomb shelter and not to put it above ground, or in this case, not to put it in space. But yeah. And look, we got a fake website, durasteel.spa. They didn't have TLDs like that at the time, so that probably wouldn't have gone anywhere. Now I'm sure it'll sell you some pornography or bitcoins, or maybe both. But mention this ad for a 10% discount, which again, today you'd have a coupon code, but we didn't have coupon codes back then. I literally had to mention that you saw the ad in a pretend book magazine. And before I go on, let me give a quick call out to just this 2 or 3 lines of text at the top that is purely playing into the fantasy that this is a computer that we can kind of see the guts of. So you'll have references to dates and sources and so on, classification levels, screen types, just up here at the top that mean nothing to anyone except somebody who really, really wants to commit themselves to enjoying this book, which should be you guys. Second section, we have the Student's Encyclopedia. And what a great way to answer any sort of question about continuity is to literally just have an extract from an encyclopedia. This is the year 2653. And in fact, we have 2 different volumes from the same encyclopedia. We'll see the other one in a minute. But this is the Current Events Annual 2653 supplement for the Student's Encyclopedia with a history of the Kilrathi War. And, just so cool to introduce people to this world the same way you would have learned about this sort of stuff at the time. When I was a kid and I wanted to know about World War II, I went to the library and I looked up a book like this. So here's just an excuse for the author to come back and give us just whatever they want us to know about the Kilrathi War. And this is the very start. We've got another great banner ad here at the bottom promising a personal holographic assistant with some great flavor text about what that means. This is one of those things that doesn't necessarily make sense anymore with a finished cut of the movie. I'm sure you all know this, but the original cut of the movie had Blair with a little hologram wizard named Merlin who would provide exposition at various points in the movie and some humor and so on, similar to similar to C-3PO in Attack of the Clones, but we were ahead of that. And for a couple of different reasons, including not having the money to do it, not getting the actor they wanted, which was Robin Williams, various problems. They cut Merlin entirely. They turned him into the voice of the computer so that Blair could still have the conversation and provide exposition at the end. But a whole bunch of aspects of the movie with Merlin are totally cut out. Like, in fact, the first scene we saw with that book, it was originally not Blair reading a book. He was talking to Merlin, and he just hides the cross in the book, and the editing makes it look like instead he's reading a book. But the idea was that he would be talking to Merlin, and they would have established that they were fighter pilots going to the Diligent and what the Diligent was and so on. So you when you cut Merlin, you lose something that's kind of goofy. I remember seeing the shooting script before the movie came out and like, oh, this is so stupid. This makes all the hairs on my neck stick up that this seems stupid. It's a stupid comic relief. I see now, you lose so much without Merlin. You don't have that necessary exposition. Georgios, I'm sorry if I said your name wrong, points out the print option at the top of the screen is so 1990s, 2000s. Yes, when was the last time you needed a special button to print things or to print anything at all? My wife does... she sells, makes and sells artwork on Etsy, so she prints stuff out. We have a printer, but it's just for mailing labels and stuff now. But I don't know what the last time I printed to print anything else was. Well, I guess I kind of do. It was like 2009 when I got the manuscript of Pilgrim Truth, and I took it to work and printed it out on the printer there, and didn't tell anyone. Sorry, public school system. Anyway, yes, the print button is very funny and of its time, and I love stuff that's of its time because that brings you back to that time, and that was my time. All right, there's an elephant in this room, and we haven't been talking about it, and we'll do it right now because this is where it comes up. The date for the Kilrathi War. Obviously, any school child knows that the Kilrathi War started in 2634, exactly 20 years before Wing Commander 1, of course. It's not some other time. The Kilrathi were discovered in 2629. The war started in 2634. That's just simple history. As part of their compromise to figure out the Pilgrim War, the folks doing this book decided to move the Kilrathi War up a couple years. And I think their first pass was to move it all the way up to like near the movie. So the Kilrathi started their attack a couple years before the movie, and it gradually gets moved back to just a couple years after the original date. Here we've changed first contact to 38 instead of 29, and the war declaration to 41 instead of 34. Don't like it. No one is ever going to follow this. No one is, this will not be the reference for anyone in the future. But I think we will integrate into the timeline. We'll point out why it's weird, and we'll think about some ways for how it could fit. Tolwyn, there was a declaration of war in 2634, but even Tolwyn says in Wing Commander 4 there was no formal state of war with the Kilrathi. There was, so it can be all mixed up. And I actually did an article about this for the CIC, and I looked at how World War II worked, and there wasn't one day where World War II started. There was day where one country declared another, and all the way into the middle of the war, you were still having little countries no one cares about declaring war on each other. So I think it's possible and not too big of a stretch to say that Confed just keeps declaring war. And we're going to have it at least twice because they don't stay consistent inside this book either. But 2641.009 is when this starts the war. So, for better or for worse. Next page. The Kilrathi. And this is one of the things that you can't have in a movie. Why you had a character like Merlin in the first place to tell us what the Kilrathi were. You're not going to spend time seeing them. You can literally... So in a book like this, it's just great to... he looked up what the Kilrathi were in an encyclopedia, and here it is. With the exception of the date here, a lot of this is very, 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 very compatible with the games. We have the CS. I think it's pronounced Jason, but I always say Iason in my head. And I know we've talked about this before, and I know we have at least one Greek person in the chat who can correct me entirely. So I would just apologize, but I will say Iason, even though that is wrong, because that is what does Guy Clark said, tattooed on my soul. I will try to say Jason, and I will say Eisen, because it's going to come up a lot. So yeah, we have the eyes and the same thing from claw marks. That was again in the shooting script, and that's going to be big deal later in the black and white section of this book. There was a scene. In fact, it's the scene with the no, it's not the scene with the tattoo, but it's where they ask. It's after the scene with that tattoo where they ask him about it, and he talks about how he was a prisoner of war. He was in the eyes in the Jason incident, and he was a prisoner of war, and that's how he got the tattoo. And they ask him, well, what do the Karathi look like? And he goes, ugly, which is a great line, and it's too bad it's not in the movie, because that's fantastic. So this book will do a lot of dancing around the First Contact Eisen story, because there's a particular vision of it has to set up, which ended up not existing. So when we wonder why there is an extended section about it in here, even though it's not mentioned in the movie once, that's why. But stuff like this, 300 to 500 inhabited systems, that matches the Wing Commander universe map so well. It abuts Vega and Gemini sector. Again, you're describing the Wing Commander universe map, the one that came with Prophecy 2 years before this. And we have a little bit of good Karathi lore. The current emperor took the throne in 2632. A lot of people immediately fight back against this. Like, oh, he's so young at the start? Well, that doesn't, that's totally, this doesn't meet my head canon, rather than this conflicts with anything that previously establishes. No reason the emperor would not have taken the throne in 2632, 2 years before the war started. Other than people think, oh, I don't want to imagine that there was another emperor before when First Contact actually happened. But why not? Why not? And these banners at the bottom, which were designed by the folks on the production side in Luxembourg, a variant of them anyway, appears in the movie. They're totally hidden because of the smoke effect and the intentional blurring of the Karathi to get you not to see how crummy they look. But one of the cool things about the Karathi Admiral and the captain is that they have these flags sticking up in the back of them that are supposed to show their different, clan alliances and medals and so on. And they look kind of like this. There's pictures of those online that were saved from an auction site, and they're really cool, and there's so much love and detail putting into the 10 different ones, and it's just neat to get a little look at them here with the Karathi movie font that was created for the movie also. This is another one that came out of the production group in Luxembourg, this kind of semaphore style font. And again, more great Karathi lore that really just extends from the Karathi lore that these same guys wrote for Victory Streak. They did that 2652 like anthropological document there, and now here's another variant, and all that's really changed is the audience. This is for school children, so it's simplified. And here is the Karathi font that apparently someone thought was how to speak their language for the cover. You can get fonts made of this now. If you want to type these in a document for some reason, there's no necessary translation. Some language person who cared could probably take the sounds from the movie and the subtitles in the movie and work out a Karathi language for that. I'm not smart enough to, and I don't think anyone else has tried, but it might be worthwhile. You see that for Star Wars. They have Star Wars things where it's like, well, Jabba the Hutt his voice is like 7 camels that we poked with a hot stick, and then we recorded them at super speed and played it backwards. And then you go on the internet and there's like, here is the exact transliteration of what he was saying. And they've created a whole Huttese language. So this is another one I like to look at the Wing Commander movie as if it was Star Wars. If it were as popular as Star Wars and we wanted to give detailed histories for every, all that after the fact stuff where we come up with a language. So someday somebody can do that. Somebody smart, not me. And again, this cryptology stuff, it does not match what the Karathi fonts look like in the game, but it does really match how they're described in Victory Streak, and it matches pretty well the kind of vertical Karathi fonts we see in Wing Commander 1, Secret Missions 2, with the Drothy cockpits. They have these, kind of braille style up and down dots and dashes for their text. So there's been a bunch of different ways that Karathi have had text. This is one of them. I don't think it's a continuity error at all to have this. How many kinds of human texts are there? How many kinds of human text? A lot. So why can't the Karathi have more than one way to write? Especially for a society that clearly has like a formal court language, and there's, I don't know. It's more interesting to have more of something than less of something in a sci-fi world. It is better to have 10 different books that are totally contradictory, and each one has some imaginative idea, because people say, oh, that's not canon, it's a continuity error. That's not what canon is. No writer's room in the world is saying, well, we're not going to reference this story because it's not canon. They're saying, hey, this story had an interesting idea, I'm going to continue on. It's the carcass you pull meat off of, not the carcass you push more meat into. I'm extremely good at analogies. So, give me more rather than less. I will warn you that the Karathi font that you can download online has some non-canon characters. Like, how many are there? 3, 6, 9. So the first 18 are canon, and they made up a couple of others. I used this font for Star Soldier, and I accidentally used 1 or 2 of the non-canon ones. So they're canon now, but I probably own some font guy. Well, let's not admit to font crimes. I'm probably still inside the statute of limitations. Yes, AD points out that the symbols get rotated, and this is not all of them. The dots appear in different places, but they have this general form. In fact, that third one there is very similar to this one here. It's very similar to the one they use for the kill marker. So I think that's the movie's idea of this one that means Kilrathi, or the symbol that means Kilrathi. All right, let's see the history of the war. Which, again, here's the timeline we're making our timeline out of. How cool is that? Oh, I guess this is a time. This does count as I don't know why it's TCM, but it's a timeline. Although, and again, this is another aspect of the movie that is totally cut out of the film, but it definitely appears here, which is that the Terran Confederation is an unreliable narrator. The movie initially has this idea that the Confederation, and it disappears as drafts go on, but that the Confederation is this kind of quasi-evil human overseer that has deleted all references to the Pilgrim War from their own history because they know they're responsible for war crimes and they're not as innocent as they seem. That doesn't get touched on in the final movie, but you can feel it here. It's effervescent with all this. It appears a lot of here, and in fact, it's one of the reasons why we have this as a children's history. This is the clean history of the wars rather than what actually happened. And that's an interesting thing to keep in context. And it's something that sci-fi fans are so bad at when they're totally nerding out. We like to throw away that meta-narrative whenever we can. We see a date, we're like, oh, this is so great. This will be the perfect thing to put in my timeline. But you have to keep the meta there. Like, I can't watch Star Trek without a little bit thinking, is this a thing that's happening, or is it a story by Benny Russell? And Wing Commander is the same way. Like, the Wing Commander 1 and 2 guide tells us that Wing Commander 1 and 2 aren't real. They're a video game based on the war. And Star Trek did that all the time. Gene Roddenberry would say, this isn't the real story. It's the story as, it's Captain Kirk's logs through our own technology. And people ignore that even though it explains all their problems. And it's the same here. But even more in like a lit major sort of a analyze the text sort of thing. This is not an innocent, this is not a third party looking at the history of the Wing Commander universe. This is the Terran Confederation Navy telling us what they want us to think the history of the war is. So, AD says he counted 25 different symbols in the movie. So that's pretty interesting. And we could probably find a couple more in source material. So one of the odd things about this timeline right here is that it does not match the dates from a couple pages ago. Here we have the Kilrathi attacking in 2639, not 2641. So they were clearly, this is an editing error, but we don't get the date for the start of the war right even inside this book. So it's suspect as we're doing a timeline. We're going to note all this stuff in the timeline, and we'll have a little red text that says, hey, think about this. And people can make up their own mind from there. I used to think we needed to come up with a perfect, flawless timeline, and I think that's a fun challenge. But I think it's a whole lot more interesting to figure out when it's not right, and to note that, and to tell people, here's everything. We've cataloged everything. Take it from there. That's our job as super fans. So we start the war with an attack on the agricultural colony at Hellespont, which, again, that's a Wing Commander 4 reference. Hellespont is one of the first systems in Wing Commander 4, which they call the Hellespont, which is one of those great sci-fi things where you add the word "the" to something and it sounds so much special. We're passing through the Hellespont. But again, it's a Greek name that matches with a lot of the Greek, mythic, ancient Greek stuff that appears in the Wing Commander Ulysses Corridor, Scylla, and Charybdis, and so on. So it fits with this theme, and it is good also. But yeah, 2639.007, 007. Less than 8 hours after news of the attacks reached Terra, the Confederation Senate passed a formal declaration of war against Korra. So my story is that we have these politicians, and I don't know if you guys know this, but politicians love pointless theater. So you have all these politicians in the Senate, and the Karathi keeps slaughtering people, and the news gets to Earth, and everybody's horrified. And I'm sure they put out some new declaration, and we will fight on and defeat these monsters, and everybody votes for them again. So that's my theory for all these war declarations, if you want to fit it together. But you don't have to. You can do whatever you want. And here at this timeline again, we've got First Contact, Yaezin. Nice use of Confederation Space Forces. That's not something that most Wing Commander sources remember exists. That, distinguishing between Space Force and Navy. We've got the Declaration of War, again, 2639. Battle in the Vega Sector. And again, here we're starting a battle for the Vega Sector before the previous article said that the war had started. So on. We've got Epsilon Initiative. That's an original battle added to the timeline by the movie. But one of the beautiful things about this period from 2634 to 2654, the era of the war before Wing Commander 1, is there's so little of it. So every little bit you find, reference to, Iceman fought in this battle, or whoever fought in this battle, and this was when the Epsilon Initiative happened. It's set up for future stories. It's flavor that you don't otherwise have. It's fun stuff. I love. It's what I love. And Battle of Repleta, again, a reference to both Academy and something introduced in Wing Commander 3's victory streak. And I remember thinking it was such a weird reference in 1994 when the new version of the timeline that came with victory streak added multiple entries about the Battle of Repleta, which you guys know it's this battle. It's World War I style trench warfare that lasts for a decade and ends with both sides completely wiping each other out. That's a short story about the meaninglessness of war that writes itself. But it just felt really odd to have that suddenly added to Wing Commander history with no side. There's no point in Wing Commander 3 where it's referenced. It's something that was purely come up with for the manual. And this is what I'm talking about later sources pulling from the carcass to make new things. Then you had Wing Commander 4, which needed a backstory for Decker, the new Space Marine captain. So, he was at Repleta, and he mentions it in the dialogue since Repleta days, when he's describing a particularly bad battle. And then you have the folks doing Wing Commander Academy in 96, 97, and they're coming up with stories for their characters, and they need a backstory for Grunt, and, he was at Repleta in the trenches, and that's why he's that's what his background is, and they reference it. They have flashbacks, and they actually say the word. I remember cheering when they said the word Repleta on Saturday morning TV, because it was the tiniest reference that was come up with to fill out a timeline in a magazine, and then it came back, and you saw it, and you saw what the tanks were like in Repleta, and you saw what the trenches were, and here it is again. And it's because somebody shoved it into the Wing Commander carcass at that point that everybody else can pull it out later. So that's why it's cool to do this stuff. All right, and here we have a map. Not just any map, but this is a map taken from the Wing Commander Universe map created for Wing Commander Prophecy, which gave us essentially the shape of the front line between the Confederation and the Empire. And the Wing Commander movie stuff very nicely takes that and reuses it a bunch of different times, and this is one of them. You can lay this right over the Wing Commander Universe map, and all the systems will match up. The jump points are the same. I do remember Captain John Gunsel, who designed the original map, said he got no credit or notice that this was going to be here, but he was glad that it was. And it's neat. The one really weird thing about this is that in the Prophecy map, you probably remember that big swaths of the deep parts of Karathi space don't have names. They're just blank. They didn't want to go through and make up a bunch of different Kathris and Kishurmar and for the different systems. So there were a bunch of blank ones. And here, for whatever reason, they have named one of them Kachris. K''CRIS. So it actually adds one system that was unlabeled on the original map. But again, and you'll recognize a lot of this map as places from the games. There's Rostov, the asteroids, the Kurosawa, where we found the Rolari, also where the original Star Citizen trailer that was supposed to be a Wing Commander trailer took place. Kurosawa system. Um, Freka and Antares. That's the systems from Secret Missions 2. All the systems in the Enigma sector from Wing 2 and Secret Missions 1, Special Operations 1. Yes, I do it too. Everyone gets the names. Everyone misspeaks the add-on names from time to time. So we've got Gorakar, the rebel planet, Rigel, where the Gettysburg rebelled, and so just a swath of Wing Commander history has been referenced. Right here, and it's I don't know. I like that. It's respectful. It's cool. It fits all together. More timeline. We also get right here. Look here. We get a description of the Battle of Repleta and how long it takes. Bloodiest battle of the war. Casualty numbers. Cool nerd stuff means nothing to anyone, but it builds us our universe, and I love our universe. I love our universe all the more now that there's nobody else who cares. Be the last guy in the room crazy about something. It's a hell of a feeling. War continues. This has its famous artist Marciano Diaz's rendering of a Karathi general in full armor. Looks cool as hell. This is actually concept art done for the movie. This was what they wanted the Karathi to look like, and it's cool to get it out there in the stream. And I understand everybody who says that they wish they look like cats. I wish they look like cats. I don't agree with the late 90s, move away from the Karathi looking like just big tigers. But I always see where Chris is trying to go with art like this. I see the, samurai inspired, Asian history influenced bad guys, which is perfect for a World War II story, which Wing Commander is. And, if you could have done this, it would have been a pretty cool villain. But of course, they couldn't do this, so it was not a pretty cool villain. And here we have by the way, CS. You're going to see CS throughout this. This was one of those ridiculous movie licensing things. Of course, it's TCS in everywhere else, except for one reference to CSS in Wing Commander where they forgot to change it. They were going to have a Confederation spaceship. Somebody pointed out, in Wing Commander 1, somebody pointed out that's the same thing as Confederate state ship. They don't use that. It seems like you're a racist or something. So they changed it to TCS back in 1990. And there's one CSS that got through. It's the CSS Suffolk in Wing Commander 1 in one of the shot class dialogues. But the movie production stuff that was done in Luxembourg went with CS. All the patches in the movie say CS. All the signs on the Tiger Claw say CS. And no one is quite sure why they did that, but they did. The actual post-production of the movie used TCS. And I remember looking at Chris Reed and high-fiving him in the theater. I think it was either a high five or yes or something. Because the super titles where they introduced, there's 3 or 4 super titles in the movie where it says TCS Tiger's Claw on patrol in the Ennio system, that sort of thing. And it says TCS. And I think they do it in the ADR if there's any ADR with ship names. But I remember specifically saying when I helped Peter Tulip edit the movie book, it should be TCS. It's TCS in all the games. And he said, I checked with them. It came back. They really want to stick to CS. So I'm going to use that. And whatever. So all the stuff that was done before the movie says CS. And then the movie used TCS. So it's throughout here. It was very intentional. No one knows why. And the actual people making the movie dropped it before it came out. But that's why you see it again and again. We saw it earlier also. We saw the CSIAs and Jason. CS Jason. So there, CS Tiger Claw, and this is very, very similar to the. This is straight out of Claw Marks. In fact, this is the Custer's Carnival, which is on the timeline. Yeah, Custer's Carnival, which I don't think they've ever explained what that name means, but and it's kind of neat because these details all match. But we actually, for the first time ever, learn that Custer's Carnival was in the Garis system, which was one of the systems from Wing Commander Prophecy, which just happens to be there on the border where it could be. If you've ever read, and of course you have, but if you've ever read the Super Famicom Japanese timeline for Wing Commander 1, it actually adds a bunch of detail to the Custer's Carnival story that's not in the very broad description in Claw Marks that says it was Confed had broke the Kilrathi code for real this time. There's an entry about that, and they were very careful to launch this attack. And the goal is, and it's very much this Clondathu story where their goal is to penetrate Kilrathi territory and take Kilra itself, and it goes wrong. I love all that color, and I love the color that gets added here. Did these people know about the Super Famicom stuff? Almost certainly not. But it all fits, and it's cool. And it gives us this detail about Custer's Carnival, which is one of those big formative events. Paladin got his gold star there. The Tigers Claw was bloodied but not beaten. It was a major Confederation victory. Tallwin was involved in the planning, and he ordered a retreat that was not listened to. All sorts of things about Custer's Carnival are interesting. And it's one of those things where each source gives us a little bit of triangle, and then we put all the triangles together, and it forms a pizza. Again, I am great at analogies. So just like with claw marks to set up for the war, we have Custer's Carnival. Oh, and look up here. The Encyclopedia of Current Events Annual 2653 is published by HarperCollins, just like the Terran Confederation Handbook. Oh, there's no Terran, there's Confederation Handbook. Yes, Georgios is right. CSS Suffolk, which Torch.com relay. And feel free to speak up from chat if there's anyone there, and if you have questions or want to talk about something else. I got nothing to, promises to keep right now. Next page. And here, I mentioned earlier, there's a second Students' Encyclopedia excerpt. As you can see, this one is the Students' Encyclopedia 123rd edition. So this is like the main book, and the previous one was from a supplemental, annual. And that's so cool. That is amazing world building. I remember going to the library in, elementary school, and there'd be, the World Book Encyclopedia and, 20 volumes for different parts of the alphabet. And then there would be little add-on books. It was current events for 1987. So it's the same thing, and they build that right into the structure of the book without being obviously about it. But here we are getting into everyone's favorite continuity topic, the Pilgrim War. So let's talk about the Pilgrim War. And again, the dates get shifted around so much that the editors of this book miss it. So right here we say Terran Confederation and the Pilgrim Alliance battle from 2631 to 2635, beginning with the Battle of Titan and ending with the fall of Perron. And that is essentially the story of the Pilgrim War that gets repeated in a lot of different sources. But right here we have the Pilgrim Alliance surrendered unconditionally on 2629.334. So 2 years before the war started. Hope somebody got fired for that one. By the way, I keep saying that because it's a joke from The Simpsons, not because I hope someone actually got fired for that one. It's supposed to be highlighting the ridiculousness of nerds complaining about stuff that doesn't matter. Which is me! I'm the nerd! So here we have Blair looking up the Pilgrim Alliance, and this actually goes with part of the narrative of the movie, which is, or the studio script of the movie, which was that Blair knows nothing about, it's in the movie still. Blair knows nothing about pilgrims. He doesn't know what his parents died for, and he wants to. He goes to Paladin to ask, why do people hate pilgrims? Which, again, it's a weird story. If it was 1886 and I was a 18-year-old and I was like, gee, Daddy, why does everybody hate these Confederates? And well, they used to try to own other people and fought a war with us that killed 500,000 people. And I was like, oh, okay. But apparently that never happened with the Pilgrims. It was just hidden somehow. Oh, I hear a siren. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there's a police siren here. I'm probably getting arrested for criticizing timelines. All right, so this is one of the most valuable pieces of the book that I think a lot of people hate because they hate thinking about the Pilgrims. I love thinking about the Pilgrims, and I like the idea of running them through the washer a few times so that all the dye comes out, and rather than this crazy thing that gets dropped in the middle of Wing Commander, it's just more of the background history of the universe. Does it seem crazy that the Confederation could fight a civil war with some religious extremists? No. That could happen anywhere in the timeline. Privateer literally does the same thing. There's this battle going on with the Church of Man, the Retros, and nobody was like, this is terrible. There were no religious extremists before this game came out. And that's the point of storytelling. You add things. You add more things. So I like the idea that the Pilgrim stuff gets added. I like the idea that it's kind of like a Mexican war for the officers that end up serving in the Kilrathi War. You look at the history of the folks in the Civil War, Lee and Grant and all of them, and they all were first soldiers in the Mexican War in 1846, 1845, 1846, somewhere like that. And they all knew each other from that. But leaders on both sides knew each other from fighting together in this previous war. It's this bit of connective tissue, and I like that in Wing Commander. I like the idea that there was another war that is in the background story of the universe. I don't love what they do with the Pilgrims later, especially in the novels, but I think it all works. And this is beautiful background for the Pilgrims. It's this idea, we're going to see a lot of it, but this the idea that, and it's reverse immersive storytelling too, because again they looked at John Gunsel's map, and one of the things he had in the map, in the not too far from Earth, was this section of religious sounding planets. It was like Beacon and Promise and so on, and at the end of the line of systems was something called McDaniel's Star, or McDaniel's, I think McDaniel's Star. And one thing he did in the map that was genius was that he tried to make areas seem like how they were settled. Like there's an area that's all Russian names, and Russian names. So it's Gagarin and Volkov and all these Rushgod and whatever. All these Russian space names, and you look at that and you say, oh, I see what happened here. This is where Russia settled an area of space, and so on. So you look at these religious ones, and you think, oh, religious crazies settled this area of space. That was something that was established in Wing Commander Prophecy in 1997. But nobody really cared because it was sort of the background knowledge of the universe. Somebody working on this book, Chris Mccubbin working on this book, saw that map and said, oh, here's interesting. I can connect this to the Pilgrims that are in the movie. And so they built this whole multi-century backstory for just from the fact that map item was called McDaniel's Star, obviously a tuckerization for somebody Johnny knew named McDaniel, and they came up with the idea that there was this lay preacher on Neptune. I think it's Neptune. We'll see, one of the outer planets, who was a physicist and a lay preacher, and he created this religion that was bound for the stars, the Pilgrim religion, which became the Pilgrim Alliance, which was the nation. And we have hundreds of years of Pilgrim history that they get across really well here, from the first leaving the star system with how their powers form. We're going to find out. There's reasonable stuff for the whole thing right here in this book, and you can either reject it or you can accept it, and I love it. And there's so much to it. I just love the idea that it's this offshoot Christian sect that, and it doesn't necessarily go and become evil. They just separate themselves from humanity, and by the 27th century, as we'll find out, they have a particularly dogmatic leadership that does not want to allow other humans to interfere with their space, and humans are starting to do that because of the discovery of the jump drive, and that's where the war comes from. That's fascinating to me. That's good storytelling. I like it. The only problem was, it was put in the middle of something people thought they already knew how it worked. Let's see. Was Pilgrim War intended to be some with lore of WC1? No, the idea that the Pilgrims existed did not come about until after Wing Commander 4. The initial idea for the movie was, it still had the same idea that the Pilgrims were this offshoot group that was fighting the Confederation, but the earliest pitches for the movie, they're called the Border Worlds, which probably would have made people angrier. Or who knows? I've seen a lot of people seem to like structure over meaning these days, but they were originally the Border Worlds, and they became the Pilgrims as a separate thing to be the backstory for the movie. So here we have this great setup. Between 2311 and 2588, they colonized 12 systems in the areas of space we know using hopper drives, and we're going to learn what a hopper drive is eventually, and it's great backstory. Basically, the idea is that there's something between a jump drive and between a slow ship, traditional, I'm going to spend 50 years getting to Sirius sort of a story, and the jump drive, I can do it instantly. So they have this idea for the hopper drive, which is a more dangerous form of jump drive that goes in little hops. So you can take months to get to a star instead of decades. And the Pilgrims use that to colonize space because their powers allow them, their powers which evolve naturally, make them selected to do that, to be able to do that in ways that an average person can't. And we'll talk about that later when we get to the power stuff. But so they the timeline, as we are going to see in the next couple of pages, I can go ahead and say it, is there's the idea that there's this giant pandemic on Earth, and when would that ever happen? But Earth is basically quarantined from the rest of the solar system in the early 21st century, mid 21st century. And again, who would ever predict a massive pandemic affecting Earth in any way? That's crazy. I'm so funny. No, Basically, there's this massive pandemic plague sort of a thing that keeps Earth separated from the rest of the galaxy. The Pilgrims go out and start exploring the universe. The rest of the solar system has to focus on basically serving Earth, providing food and medicine and dropping heavy machinery from orbit. It's this new economy where you have a culture exchange. You have the home planet that's the source of the culture, but it can no longer take care of itself, and so you have the outer planets and Mars and so on that have to take care of it, and they become increasingly unhappy doing that. And you have either people who hew closer to Earth and the United Nations, or they listen to Ivar Chu McDaniel and they say our destiny is the stars. And then it's a great setup for conflict as far as Hey, Gray-Headed Gamer, it's good to see you too. I am happy to be back. I hope. Hopefully I'll keep doing this. I've been putting it off forever, but it's time, I think. AD points out that the movie script was developed alongside WBC4, and that is true. A lot of the movies... During and after Wing Commander 4, the first big sponsor of the movie was a guy named Jeff Siegel at Universal, who developed Wing Commander Academy, the TV show, and he kind of got Chris's desire to do a movie moving in Hollywood. Unfortunately, they didn't go with Universal for the actual production. The money just didn't work out, but that's around when it came to be. Basically, Pilgrim War, we start with this Pilgrim surprise attack on human space station. They want Earth to say, we're not going to go and explore the universe. You guys own all these colonies. We're not going to go. Earth, before the arrival of the Pilgrims, before the discovery of the jump drive, Earth had been limited to a very specific area of space it could colonize. The jump drive's based on an earlier treaty with the Pilgrim Alliance. After the development of the jump drive, they could basically jump over the treaty zone, skip it entirely, and start spreading out through the galaxy, which they were doing. And that's the setup for the war. The Pilgrims come in, they want to enforce a new treaty with their gunships, and it ends up being a battle. Here we have the background of the Pilgrim Cross, right at the bottom here. The dagger represents divine judgment against unbelievers, and the cross symbolizes the salvation of the elect. I'm not wearing my cross, actually. I meant to have it today. I wore it the other day to go out, which I rarely do these days, and then I put it down, and then I couldn't find it, so next time. But it's nice to have some lore for the Pilgrim Cross. There's stuff about the blade, and how it can be recessed. And I love this bit of flavor text right at the end. Some of the more ornate crosses are believed to have been chemically treated so they glow or shimmer in response to the wearer's body chemistry. Mine does not, but it would be cool if we could figure out how to do that. Let us see what is next. I know there's a next page button, but I keep not pressing it. There you go. And here's literally all that history I was just talking through about the first of the great pandemics in the 22nd century. And this is all great lore. This is how what will become the Confederation is called the United Nations. At this point, it will be called the WEC at some point after this. How it reaches out into the solar system. And again, it's something that's covered this is 500, 600 years ago as of Wing Commander 1. It's rarely mentioned. So we throw all these little bits in that timeline and they come together and they make a soup. And what greater goal is there than making soup? So this is all what I was talking about. The imagery here is, Hubble imagery, NASA imagery that is free to use in this sort of thing. So, you need a picture of Mars. Good thing you pay your taxes, because everybody has free pictures of Mars they can use. And in fact, Chris Roberts was famously against using Hubble imagery in the movie itself. So I don't think these are Hubble pictures. These are from other missions. But it's one of those different. He would have done this differently probably. Knowing Chris Roberts, he would have just spent lots and lots of money creating his own planets, and they'd still be in the works. But it would have been more impressive. But again, I love this. I love the idea of how do you create something like this when you don't have the resources. What comes out when you have to make something and you have the passion to make something and the call to make it, but you don't have the resources, and it's great. It's great to me. So all this history about the great pandemics and Earth and so on, and now we have the Pilgrims and McDaniel leaving. Okay, it's Neptune. Did I say Neptune earlier? I must have said Neptune. So I was right, Neptune. The Pilgrims take their massive ships out into the galaxy. There's a whole story about how Ivar Chu McDaniel's ship disappear. And, actually, it's important to point out here. So the very first pilgrim ship out into the universe, captained by or commanded by Ivar Shue McDaniel, the leader of the religion, the space pope at that point, disappears on its first jump and isn't heard from again. And it's all flavor here. It's just flavor text to give an idea for how their religion works. But when he's doing the sequel novels, Peter Tellep picks that up and runs hard. And we find out what happened to them. And we have basically Orthodox pilgrims versus modern pilgrims. And it's fun stuff all around. So yeah, this is all that same lore. I love this. It's going to take hours to go through this and pull out what goes in the timeline and what doesn't. But it's great. And here we see the map again. This is another cutting from the Wing Commander Universe map, which I should point out was also used by the guys who did the intro of the movie itself. The big, and it used to be back behind Chris when he would do videos at the old office at CIG. The map of the Vega sector. That is a stylized painting of or derived from the Captain Johnny's Wing Commander Universe map. And again, here we see. Literally, this is pointing out where they basically discovered the pre-built religious area of space. You got Faith, Beacon, Promise, McDaniel's world. Maybe it is world on the map. And Chris Mccubbin put that in his head and said, okay, that's where the religious crazies work. And you have a whole history based on that little background. And another thing that I know sci-fi nerds love, and somehow I'm the only one who does this, is when you have an alternate name for something. We call them the Pilgrims, but the formal name of the church is the McDanielite Church, and the formal name of the political entity is the Pilgrim Alliance. And I love learning all that stuff and figuring it out and using it in places. When I was just thinking about it, what is the name of the Kilrathi War? And I've been looking through that and kind of pulling out notes because there's so many places where it's like the Galactic War, or the Terran Kilrathi War, or the Kilrathi War Z with an S. And I love pulling that all together and think, okay, these are the options. Here's our word bank. So yeah, it's coming up with the technical terms for something would be called in a world is very fun to think about to me. More Pilgrim history in our M14 TCN5 public data, personal data unit. And this is all the story I just talked about, the formation of the Pilgrim Alliance, how it became powerful, how it became radicalized. And here is the war itself, which, again, we're not quite matching the dates from the start of the article, but we'll note that and move on with it. But we have the war starting in 2631. And sort of the story of the Pilgrim War is that the Pilgrims attack the Confederation. They're unprepared. The big swaths of the frontier are annexed, and the humans are tortured and made slaves, essentially. But then the Confederation builds something called the Grand Fleet in secret, which is a massive army of battleships, sort of similar to the Great White Fleet in American naval history. And it's what Tolbin was referring to earlier in the article. And again, they're giving us this history out of order, so we know his reaction to it, but we don't know what he was reacting to until now. It's the idea that the Confederation basically let the colonies suffer and die while they were building up their forces for one big stroke. And that happens. The Confederation launches an offensive with this fleet while they build a second fleet. There's this very violent war that essentially eliminates both forces, but the Confederation has a second fleet in the works, and that is what finally ends the war. They end up besieging the Pilgrim planets, ending up on a planet called Perone, which is where Blair's parents die, which we'll see in just a moment. It's why he's looking this up, actually, which we will see. And, here, over the course of the next 5 months, Centauri, Sirius, Cygnus, Phrase, and Bradshaw fell in rapid succession. The increasingly desperate Pilgrims take everything on an all-or-nothing defense of an agricultural colony of Perone in the Leuton system. And, you've been there before. This is one of those great you've been there before. They only ever call it Perone in the movie. But it's in the Leuton system, which is one of the systems you fight in Secret Ops. Wing Commander Secret Ops, the last game that had come out before this. So there's a 7-month siege on Perone. Arnold Blair, who is Blair's dad, and his wife Debbie Soulsong, who's his mom, who's a pilgrim, are separated. He ends up dying trying to rescue her during the siege right before it ends, because he knows that the Confederation is going to use their overwhelming power to basically wipe out the planet. And once they do that, it ends the war. Accords were signed at Cygnus on 2635.049. The Pilgrim Alliance officially ceases to exist. The Peter Tellep novels do a lot of interesting stuff with what that means, how pilgrims are and are not integrated back into the Confederation. We'll talk about that some other time, but it's super interesting, and it's all derived from this. And you can see, again, we're ending the Pilgrim War just after the Kilrathi War originally started. And to me, that's not a problem. I think countries can have multiple wars going on at a time, especially when they are such massively different scales. You know, the Kilrathi War, the Pilgrim War is a battle over 12 systems. The Kilrathi War is a battle over thousands of systems. It's all about the scale. And obviously, I think that you can have more than one war at once because I'm an American, and that's what we do. No. So, yeah, and you can see here at the bottom, Blair is looking up information about his dead dad, Major Arnold Blair. But before we see that information, which I guess I just told you, we have another banner ad for authentic Frasian Warsop eggs. Tuesday Phrase was another one of those great Origin developers working on all this lore stuff. So she gets called out. In fact, she actually got called out in that list of planets earlier. Phrase was one, but here she is the inspiration for Frasian Warsop eggs. I don't know what a Warsop is. You don't know what a Warsop is. No one knows what a Warsop is. But isn't it fun to imagine? And again, you know, put that a Warsop reptile. Put that in the lore notes, and somebody can pull it out of the wiki someday. And you know, again, it's an import company. This means nothing to anyone, and that's why it's so cool. Why it means so much to me. And here we have Blair. Chris Blair, Freddie Prinze Jr. Blair, looking up the article about his dad being killed, which is still unclassified. And this is the cleaned up version. This mentions nothing about the fact that he was on an illegal mission and that he was trying to rescue his mom. It just mentions in the background that Blair's wife Debbie also died recently. So again, we're at this, you know, remember the source sort of a thing where it's saying. Oh, and here's that university thing I was talking about. Blair's dad went to the University of Kingston, and he has a master's degree from the Sorbonne. That's not your average, like, choices for fake educations in the future thing. And it's kind of cool. The idea is that Blair's dad was basically a software developer. He was in ROTC, did officer training, but he was a reservist. He was not some academy person. He was not a dedicated military guy. He was a software designer building colonies, and when the war came to the colonies, he was called up to serve, and he became an ace pilot. Basically became the person you see on Wing Commander Academy when Blair visions a ghost of his dad. And, you know, this is all just his cleaned up, remember the source, history of the military, 25-month, and yeah, this is the kind of lore I love. 25-month tour as a pilot aboard the carrier CS Harrison. And there's another tour he does somewhere after that. He works on building the Second Grand Fleet, and then he goes back and fights off the CS Foster at the end of the war. And that's all, you know, it's like when Star Trek gives... There was a Strange New Worlds itself is this thing, because it's, hey, we have this one or two stories about Captain Pike. What if we talk about all his adventures? And then there was another one. There was one this season where it was the court episode. I think it was the second episode of the season where they have Captain April on the stand in court, and he's talking about his adventures in the Enterprise, and it's just, he lists off a bunch of things that happened that were similar to the things we know from the other Star Trek we watch. Like, oh, there's a whole other show there. You know, there's a whole Wing Commander game of Blair's dad serving for 25 months aboard the TCS Harrison. And he gets 11 confirmed kills and sinks 2 capital ships and gets medals. You know, he's literally going through Wing Commander 1, but it's his dad. That's cool as hell to me. And, you know, it lets you build that up. And again, here, though, we're calling him Commodore Tallwin. You know, the fact that they use Commodore here could help some fan who wants to twist this to fit right. And the reason we have this is because, again, in earlier versions of the movie that this was based on, there was a much more clearer connection between Admiral Tallwin saying he served with Blair's parents in the Pilgrim War. I think he says that in the finished movie, but there were earlier drafts. It was much more direct where he says what he did with them. So we have... Commodore Tallwin released the following statement upon the death of Major Blair. Arnold Blair was a true model of an officer, gentleman, and scholar. We celebrate his heroic, honorable life and grieve for the loss of a heart so pure and a mind so brilliant. And such, you know, it's a quote from Tallwin about how great Blair is, and you know that's great because, you know, obviously we start with the idea that he's been watching Blair's kid for some reason, and here's the reason. He feels like he owes it to the dad. And that is kind of it adds a layer to the Blair Tolwyn history, because we know that the story is then that it's the same in Academy. Tolwyn is watching out for Blair, and Blair rebels. He says he doesn't agree with how Tolwyn commands things, and the end of the show is him throwing away his medal. And it's that same idea here. Tolwyn ends up disliking Blair so much because Blair had rejected him. It's taking the Wing Commander 2 setup and it's pushing it back a little bit to explain it a little more, and I love that. So that's cool stuff. And again, here a reminder: the GFIO this is from a PIO in the future. This is not what really happened. This is what the Confederation wants you to think will happen, and we'll see later in this book that that's the case. This is not the true story. This is saying he was on a mission in a Merlin class fighter. There's a nod again. Again, one of the things that was established in the movie was that Blair's dad created Merlin for whatever reason. Which is why, again, we go back and we have, he's a software designer. The movie simply has Merlin mention that he was made by Blair's dad. And then you have a book like this that says, that was because Blair's dad was a computer designer in addition to a soldier. And the name comes from the fighter. The name is implied to come from the fighter he was flying. And once you know that original movie story, where all the little bits and why some of this stuff seems so odd compared to the rest of Wing Commander. What it's covering up for and building on is interesting to me. But again, this is the Confederation story. It claims he was on a secret mission. We will find out by the end of the book that he was not on a secret mission. He was trying to rescue his wife against orders, and it becomes a whole scandal, which we'll learn about more. And now, the most famous part of any Wing Commander thing Commander, is Jones fighting ships. This is a parody of Jane's All the World's Aircraft. Jane's does these... In the real world, Jane's does like these big compendiums of what aircraft exist and their histories and their specifications, and they sell them to on a consumer level too, but they're also like an information provider to defense departments, and it's the document of record about military hardware of different types. So Wing Commander came up with Jones fighting ships as a goofy parody for claw marks, and they've used it ever since. Even through the 90s, when Jane and Electronic Arts ended up having a deal with Jane's to use their mark for flight sims, and they put out a whole war sims, whole range of submarine and aircraft and whatever sims. Some of them done at Origin and what they called Origin Skunk Works in Maryland, but they never made a deal to use the Jane's mark in Wing Commander. They stuck with Jones. But it's a funny coincidence that a lot of the same guys who worked on Wing Commander ended up working on Jane's longbow and so on. So here is the history of the CF-117 Rapier, and again, this is one of those things that really annoys people, that they called the ship in the movie Rapier, and the backstory does not match the Rapier from the game, and it could not match the backstory for the Rapier from the game, because the Rapier from the game doesn't enter service until later in 2654, so it has to be a different ship if you're putting them both in the history, and there's a lot of reasons why it is a different ship in existing Wing Commander lore, and we can talk about that sometime if everybody wants to watch, if anybody cares, but it's clearly a different ship, and we have some fun nods in here. We talk about how it's replacing the Scimitar, just like it did in the game, and people have rallied behind the CF-105 for the Scimitar. People love getting designations for spaceships. Nerds are horny for nothing more than getting a designation for a spaceship. So when one leaks out, like the Scimitar that never had an F designation in the other media, people love that it's the CF-105 Scimitar. From this one reference and nothing else. And we get the description of the rotary barrel neutron gun, because you watch the movie, you have no idea this is a neutron gun. It seems like it's a slug thrower. But we have all this lore about how it's a neutron gun, and it's got lasers in the wings that we don't see. And, just perfect trash lore for a fake spaceship. There's a LARP variant that has an intense sensor package. It's just the sort of thing you would read if you were reading Jane's. And, poring over these details that will never personally matter to your life. But a nice 100-year history for this spaceship, making sure it's clearly separate from the one in the game. The company for Jones is different on it. They call it the property of Jones Interactive Data. It's Borger's All the Sectors Weapons. Borger's Publishing, I think, in Colmar. So hope somebody got fired for that one. And again, these are early renders. This is not a finished render of the rapier. This is the state it was in mid to late '98, and that will become even more clear soon when we have a great excuse for one of these. So here's the rapier. Oh, there are those shield specs. Oh my God, it has shield specs. 7 centimeters, incredible. But it's just the same kind of fun stats you love in the game. If you want to compare the rapier and the Drolthy to the ones in the game, this is a chance to do it. The only thing that really stands out is the lengths for the ships on here. They are accurate to the physical ships, so they're much shorter than the ones in the games, which are unreasonably long. And you can have a many-year argument about which one of those is right, because the rapier in Wing Commander 1 is clearly not 24 meters long when you see it on the flight deck next to a human figure, unless it's some kind of Prometheus thing going on here. But these stick out because it's 9 meters, and yeah, that is how long that is in the physical rapier that exists. And here we have the broadsword. Again, this is one that people get angry about, even though we see broadswords in Wing Commander 1 serving off the Tiger's Claw in Wing Commander Academy. People do not like, people don't like anything, but it's great backstory for the broadsword, now called the CF-131, and how they were created during the Pilgrim War, and they've been in some, and it reminds me so much of the B-17. Have you ever looked at the first B-17 prototype, which is like the Boeing model 299 or 229? My brain isn't so good with old World War II designations anymore, and it looks crazy. It's got like these bubble turrets on the side of it. It does not look like a B-17, what they will eventually become. And you look at the end of their life, and there's like B-17 drones, and there's the G with the chin turret and so on. There's all sorts of variations of things that are all flying fortresses, and I like that story for the broadsword, that it starts off as not even a torpedo bomber. They didn't have torpedoes then. It's just a regular bomber, and it gets modified and updated over the years. So this is the earlier broadsword. We see others later. We see them in Privateer. We see them in Arena. We see another generation of broadswords that are clearly built in the original. So I can see this line right here from this broadsword used in the Pilgrim War to the one in Wing Commander 2 and the one in Wing Commander Arena. And I saw that line so clearly in 2005 or 6 or whenever we did Arena that I got it put in the flavor text of the... Chris Reed and I went to EA to work on Arena for a little bit, and they said, "Oh, we need flavor text for the ship selection screen," and we were like, "Let's do it!" And we sat down right there, and I for one of the broadswords, I put in a reference to the original broadsword of the Pilgrim War. So anybody who tells you that the games do not reference the movies is wrong and a liar and bad. They do. There's a reference to the Pilgrim War on screen in Arena, thanks to Chris Reed and I, and that was fun as hell. So again, just more great lore. It mounts a Tempest targeting system. What does that mean? Nothing. Is it great? Yes. That's our broadsword. Yeah, they don't get torpedoes until 2648. They're just regular strategic bombers before that, which is great. And again, 12 meters matches the physical cockpit we see in the game. Oh, I wasn't looking at chat because I'm an idiot. Giorgio says, isn't there a similar description of Blair in the strategy handbook where he's called a Jeffersonian gentleman? That is actually from the press kit for Academy for the TV show, which describes him as a Jeffersonian gentleman, I believe. So yes, that does exist. 80 is looking for a way to stream the movie. If folks want to watch the movie after this, we could do that some weekend. I do it a lot. But yeah, it actually would be fun. And we have all the scripts and stuff, or the different shooting scripts at the CIC. So if you were ever interested in seeing those, you could go through and look at all the different versions. And in fact, I wanted to talk to AD about this. We need a transcript version after the shooting script. We should have the literal transcript from the movie subtitles for the different, for all the other bits of ADR they added, like the Hornet lines, just so you can reference that. And we may already have that, and I've missed it. But if we don't, we should do it. And by we, I mean you. AD. Sorry, I'm becoming shinier as we go on because it's very hot today, and I turned off the fan so it wouldn't annoy anyone. But I'm still okay for now. Let's get through this ship guide. Drolthy, KF-100. Drolthy, I would say, is the ship people complain the least about from the movie. Despite the fact that it does not look like the Wing Commander 1 Drolthy. I think people they'd seen the Drolthy change so many times that they were happy to see this. And here's a famous thing that comes up many other places because it has been fan lore forever. Dralthi do not have an ejection system. Kilrathi warriors are expected to live or die with their fighters. So that is something people have been saying about Kilrathi ships since 1991, when Secret Missions 2 had the Dralthi, the captured Dralthi that you fly, and one of the things they tell you is they couldn't install a Confederation ejection system, so you can't eject from the Dralthi missions in Secret Missions 2. But if you go back and look at it, they're not telling you Dralthi don't have ejection systems. They're just telling you they couldn't put them in the Confederation chair they put in there for you. In fact, in the novel Freedom Flight, written with that, telling the story of that, you specifically see Hunter eject from a Dralthi before it's been converted. He opens the hatch and slips out. And you have references to Kilrathi ejecting everywhere. They do it throughout Academy. They do it in the Wing Commander 1 and 2 guide. You have lines in Wing Commander 1 where if you shoot down an ace, sometimes you're like, I didn't see if he ejected. So the idea that the Kilrathi are Klingon warriors who can never eject is not right. And it's a major part of Wing Commander 2's story. Prince Thrakath ejects, and he gets tractored in at the end of the story to come back. So this is the most literal stating of this, but it doesn't match anything else. It's just fan lore that has kind of become flavor text, and it kind of has to be worked around. Let us see. So Dralthi, and again, it's not the finished Dralthi, but it's probably the best look you get at it because they are blinking you miss them in the movie itself. And all sorts of great Dralthi lore. And cool renders from the top of the bottom. And I have all these images, they're source images. I should just post all those somewhere so people can do what they want with them. There's no reason not to do that. And here's another interesting one. Specifications for the Salty. There is no Salty in the movie, as you remember. But if you go back to the storyboards and the movie as it was shot, it does not have just one Kilrathi ship. It calls for Salty and Krant at different times. And the idea was we were going to see 3 different Kilrathi fighters. And all the way through the storyboard phase, there are drawings of Salty and Krant. But they don't get to those. They use the Dralthi because it was done for, like when Maniac is supposed to shoot down, I think he shoots down one Kilrathi ship and it crashes into the other. The script calls for it to be a Salty or a Krant, I can't remember. But it's just Dralthi in the final movie. And it's, of course, because that's in the script, it's also in the novelization. So if you're wondering why they're Krant and Salty all over the novelization, that is why. They're in the script. And if they had more time for the effects, this was a cut for costs, cost and time. So, Salty and Krant are in this guide, and we have stats they came up with for them and little histories about the Krant one is my favorite because it talks about how it's a dive bomber, which is something we don't see in other Wing Commander scenes. And I guess it would have been a dive bomber in the intro. You would have seen them diving and bombing Pegasus, which again becomes a Dralthi in the final version. But the idea of a dedicated carrier-based dive bomber is really cool to me. And I would argue that the fact that we have to specify no ejection system on each Kilrathi ship means that there are Kilrathi ships with ejection system. Why would you have to repeat it if they never have ejection systems? But that's where the Salty comes from. And here we have an ad for VR Sports. What are VR Sports? I don't know, but it sure looks like a banner ad from the internet. In fact, it looks so much like those banner ads Hadrian made when we first started the CIC that were terrible. Probably the same graphics program, Page Shop Pro or something. And look, here's that image I was talking earlier. This is the sign that's a Kilrathi ship. It's used for the kill markers. And here's the Krant that we just talked about. Ad for Privateer's Gemini Sector. The Undisturbed World of Gemini Sector, the tour of a lifetime. Because in Privateer's lore, the Gemini Sector is just being settled for the first time at this time to create a buttress against the Kilrathi who are in that area. So that's the button that would take you to Privateer in the Wing Commander universe. The Krant, we talked about how it's a dive bomber. Medium fighter / bomber. And I love the focus on the life support and all these. None of it matters to anybody except, of course, in the movie we do see the life support running out on a rapier at the end. So it's derived from the shape of the movie, but it doesn't have any particular meaning. And then we do the capital ships after that. Everybody loves the Concordia. Here's great Concordia backstory. This is the 3rd ship named Concordia, second linearly. Of course, the initial idea with the script was that this would be Wing Commander 2's Concordia, the Confederation-class battleship that we see in the mid-60s. That doesn't fit with the lore. That doesn't fit with this lore. And before the movie even came out, we'd already established that there's a whole Enterprise-style lineage of Concordias, starting with the one in Action Stations, which is the original Concordia that fights the Karathi at the Battle of Mccubbin. So this is the second, or who knows, maybe the third Concordia. And it's a cool as hell battleship thing. And now again, just lore about the Concordia class, because it's never going to show up anywhere, and it's great to learn about now. Oh, they were made for the Pilgrim War, and I love this. Stats for the Concordia, and again, this does not match the finished images of the ship. This is early renderings. And the Bengal, this is the Tiger's Claw, another one we like to argue about at the time, because the claw marks version of the Tiger's Claw history was that it was the first Bengal class carrier, and that it entered service in 2644. This says that they entered service in 2619. But here, the scheduled roll for the follow-up is the WC2 Concordia. It's supposed to come online in 2657. That's the nod to that. The 104 fighters is straight out of claw marks. And this isn't saying that it's not adding history to the Tiger's Claw. It's just saying that the first Bengal was 2619. So maybe the Tiger's Claw is the first of the Flight 2 Bengals or something of that nature. But we'll note it all in the timeline. More top and down views. I would say this is probably the furthest along of the renderings that are included in the book, because they got the shape of most of the cap ships done very early. There's a physical model of the Tiger's Claw that appears in Captain Sansky's office in the movie. So they had to have this shape down early, and they started the effect shots of the capital ships early. And the Tiger's Claw is the one that appears most in the in various scenes. So it's furthest along and most detailed here. And now we have the Karathi capital ships. Snake Hero is the big one that we see at the end of the movie. And this is all great lore, like what kinds of destroyers accompany it, what the crew is, how many fighters it has. Just great lore. And another ad. I have all these ads as separate graphics too. We should buy like ad space and put them online or something. I'll stick all of those online after this also. And here we have, the Karathi ships were among the last finished. So we have very few angles of them, but at least we get to see that the Snake here is the big long one, and we'll see the Sivar is a little bit smaller but similar, and then we'll see the other two. And here, instead of having extra images, we have about how it was just discovered. So they're just putting together reports at Jones, which is cool. That's a nice cover for not having a nice cover, lack of information. Same thing for the Sivar Dreadnought. The imagery is limited. We stick an ad for neural massage there instead of having a front view. I would like to have my neurological self-stress levels cut in half with a single 10-minute session. So maybe that could become a reality. But again, the Sivar is very similar to the other one. The Thrakra Comcon. This is the Karathi command ship from the movie. This is all setting up to be like a super special thing that you rarely see, which is, again, to explain why Blair is so interested when he finds it in the movie. It's a rare bird. The novelization goes the opposite way, because Peter Telp came to me and said, "What's the Thrakra Comcon?" He got just the name and had to work from there. And I said, "Oh, there's nothing like that, but there is a part in Wing Commander 1 where a Dorkier is used as a command and communications platform. It's in, I think, the Brimstone system, and you blow it up, and they talk about how it's going to disrupt the chain of command." So I said, maybe that's what they call the converted Dorkier. So the movie novel talks about how it's a converted transport. That's my fault. But yeah, another very pretty spaceship with stats and lore. And here's where things get obviously not quite done. You have the Frothy, which is, again, the ship from Wing Commander 1. Ad for exotic hollow blooms. They'll deliver anywhere. This was before people delivered anywhere. But here we have one of the great cover-ups of this book, which is they don't have any renderings of the ship yet, so they use an untextured one straight off of somebody's SGI machine at Digital Anvil, and they say that it's the intelligence model. So even though the story is about how they've been around for 150 years, the the only picture that Jones has is this untextured mesh. So, and we kind of did that throughout Star Citizen. We would never have anything done in time, and it would always be, what's the story for this? What's the story in the universe for why this isn't done? And this is always an inspiration to me for that sort of thing. Rolari is more done, and again, great lore about. And one of the things about this lore is how there are thousands of these ships. Scale of warfare has always been kind of weird in Wing Commander, because you have novels that are like, there are 8 carriers in the entire war, and then you have ones where like 8.7 trillion people died in the war. And like, there's got to be a medium ground there. So this gives us the idea that there are at least thousands of ships of the line, destroyers, cruisers, and so on, out fighting the war at any time, which I think is the best choice. Puts it up there with Star Wars and their 25,000 Star Destroyers or whatever is canon now. More Rolari, and look, it's the same. You can get access to Wing Commander 1 with this fact. It has the correct mass that will get you into the copy production of Wing Commander 1. And last but not least is the great Proxima Spaceworks Errant. This is the ship that fills in for the Bonnie Heather in this story. And it is a beautiful knockoff of the Millennium Falcon taken in a unique way. You've all seen the model. It used to be at CIG on display. It's just a cool privateer ship. I would love to have a game where you got to fly this and got to do privateer style stuff. And just the name Proxima Spaceworks is so influential. I guarantee you that when I named Origin Jump Works, when I did the Star Citizen companies, this was what I was thinking of. The workhorse of the Confed economy. I love little phrases like that. And a beautiful ship, a distinct silhouette. There was no reason to have a hero ship that was so distinct for this role, but it turned out really, really well. And look, it's like the privateer stats. Armor is optional. Just like in privateer, you would go and buy your armor individually. And here are the last of the unclassified. I don't know why this is unclassified. I don't know why it's not later in the book. Why can Blair access this? But it is the letter from Angel to Bossman's wife, talking about how he died in the context of the movie. It would require hours to talk about all the different issues with Bossman's death and when it happened. Is it the version here? Is it the version from Secret Missions 2? Is it the version from Freedom Flight, which also contradicts the version from Secret Missions 2? I don't know. I'll put them all on the timeline and see what sticks. But this is a great little description of a space battle in the Wing Commander style, of 4 pilots getting jumped by the Kilrathi and one of them saving the day. It's a neat little story. It's also dated 2652.074, which is literally the day that they get to the Tiger's Claw in the movie. So this is what Angel was doing right before she chewed out Blair about talking about getting a Bossman's fighter. So there's some context there. And the wife's name is straight from Wing Commander 1, or Claw Marks, and it's just one of those great in-universe documents, the sort that you would get a bunch of in things like Victory Streak and Voices of War and so on. It's just really good lore. There are no number of confirmed kills, background, and so on. And the other thing that they work in here is the explanation of something that makes no sense in the movie. This is a case of a tie-in product taking something from the movie and fixing it in the same awkward way that fans fix things. Which is, we're told in the Wing Commander movie when Blair sits in the fighter, like, oh, this is Bossman's fighter, and oh no, it's unassigned. You remember that whole scene. Bossman is dead, and so they don't talk about him. But you're left with one question, which is, how did they get his fighter back? Can you think of any space battle in any Wing Commander game ever where it ends with the pilot dead, but the fighter still back at home base? So here we get a story about how he was killed by radiation and the fighter was left in space and they came and recovered it, which seems necessary. That seems like a necessary story, but it's also recognition of the limits of humans writing lore. Anyway, that is the last of the declassified material, and I realize now that I have been going on for 2.5 hours about the first small chunk of this book, so I am gonna have to wrap it. Oh wait, no, there's one more. Okay, let's talk about this. Let's finish the declassified stuff, and then I'll turn in and we'll do the secret stuff next time. And this has been fun for me. I don't know if anybody else has enjoyed this, but I've been really enjoying this. I'm in a pool of my own sweat here because the weather's terrible, but hopefully that's not a problem for people on stream. Last section of the let me go ahead and make sure it's the last section. If my mind is not. Okay, it is the last section, but it's very long. Okay, so this document, which is lengthy, and this is what the credit for the science writer and the science illustrator at the start is for, because they did all these graphics that are supposed to be this is a layman's guide to how engines work in Wing Commander, both the sublight engines, the ships that a ship uses to go from space to space in a star system, and the jump drive, and the hopper drive, which is the new idea that's being introduced. And we have just endless pseudoscientific lore that is wonderful, how it converts hydrogen to deuterium with scoops, how ships travel from nav point to nav point, gathering stuff with ram scoops. And I think if you're reading this for the first time, you're going to say, wow, they really paid attention to the Wing Commander novels, which, if you've ever read End Run or Fleet Action, the first time you read them, there's all this stuff about how the ship's engines work. It's mentioned throughout, but it's always done so passingly. It's like, oh, he opened the scoops and the ship got to maximum speed and traveled from point to point. There's all these references to scoops in particular, the hydrogen, the ram scoops, the ion engines, and so on. And they all seem to make sense together, but there's no Rosetta Stone. It's like the author clearly had this idea, but he never gave us told us where he got from. But he writes, Forstchen writes like it's something any Wing Commander fan would know. And there's a reason for that, which is this document, or an earlier variation of this document. It's very, very close to this. They went through and they added stuff that's specific to the movie, like the hopper drives and the pilgrims. But this actual document was written by Siobhan Beeman for Wing Commander 2 in 1990-1991. You can get the original version on the CIC wiki. There's photos of it that we took at the University of Texas's archive. But she came up with this incredibly elaborate, long document detailing how the ships pseudoscientifically work. Why do they act like they're World War II fighters when they're dogfighting, but they have to travel long distances in space when you're on autopilot? And they basically came up with all these quasi-scientific explanations for why that happens. And that was included in the series Bible that was given to licensors in 92-93. So Bill Forstchen, who never played a Wing Commander game in his life, read this long, incredibly detailed document, internalized it, and referenced it over the years over and over and over again. And nobody knew where that was coming from because this was entirely an Origin internal document. But when this was published in 1999, suddenly, here was the Rosetta Stone. Here was where all the references to how jump drives work were coming from. And that makes this section worth it for the book itself. We have the history of Dr. Akwende, who discovers the jump drive, and you'll see that same name. That name was in the original document, and it's in the universe map. If you go to the Wing Commander universe map, you're going to see it also called the Akwende drive, and mentioned. It's in the prophecy guide. It's mentioned throughout because it was in that formative Bible material we never got to see. And we just have this great Star Trek style theory for jump drives where you imagine a bed sheet, and you drop marbles on it, and the distance between the two marbles is what a jump line is, rather than the long. It's great. It works really well together, and it's just bathing yourself in pure nerd stuff. You got what average person cares about the history of the technology from a particular place? It's like watching a Star Trek movie and you hear them mention warp drive, and then you go home and you get your Star Trek guidebook that has 20 pages about how warp drive works in their different scales. And it's that for Wing Commander. And that's so cool because Wing Commander isn't Star Trek. It doesn't have that dedicated crazy fan base. And the hopper drives are actually called Morvan drives, and written by Dr. Morvan. Just amazing lore, and like this Klein vessel based art thing that's supposed to show how remember everybody was into Klein vessels in the late 90s. They were crazy about them, but just great pseudoscience. And then we got the history of jump drives, And we have the first jump drive test and the Haile Selassie. Just pure lore. Wonderful, wonderful lore. And then we spend some time explaining Scylla and Charybdis, the two space anomalies we see in the movie. Charybdis is a quasar. Despite being in the Dakota system, which should be in our galaxy, there are no quasars in the Milky Way. But we'll forget about that. Maybe the sheet is really long for a quasar. You know, it actually makes sense the way they do it. But we have the explanation of what Scylla and Charybdis are and what they do. Like here, you know, the movie sets up that you can jump from anywhere if you have the Navcom AI. Well, here we have an actual chart that takes that same Wing Commander universe map and like, what can you reach from Charybdis, which is in the Dakota system here in Vega? Well, here's all the jump coordinates that, depending on what secret information you have from your computer that's the copy of a Mind of a Pilgrim, you can reach these places. This is why the Kilrathi won it. You know, these are the theoretical jump locations. I love that stuff. That is such cool lore, and it goes so deep. It's just endless. There are so many details about what Charybdis is, what a quasar means for the Confederation system of jumps. And then there's Scylla, which Scylla is something that's kind of, again, on its face silly, that this book kind of tries to fix before the movie comes out. You know, you remember at the beginning of the Wing Commander movie, they make the jump in Scylla, and then it's the thing at the end of the movie that sucks in the Kilrathi because Blair remembers it's there. Which, again, generic space anomaly, that makes sense. It sucks in stuff that gets close to it. Except the movie starts and ends in the Sol system, and there's no Scylla. You know, we can't look up in the sky and see that there's Scylla out there. So this actually comes up with a great little lore bit about how Scylla has an anti-graviton cloak, so you can't see it at all until you're inside the danger zone. So it's out there nearby, and we just can't see it right now because we haven't entered its danger zone. And once you do, it's too late. Which again kind of fits with the movie where they hear the alarm that it's too late and they rush up to the bridge and Maniac has flown too near Scylla, the buoy that's warning people to stay away from Scylla. So it fits with the movie, and it kind of fixes the idea that, yeah, there can be a weird glowing space blob in the Sol system. Okay, and that is the end of the unclassified material. And I had wanted to do the entire book tonight, but we're at 2.5 hours, and no one wants to hear me talk for more than 2.5 hours. So I'm going to call it right here, and we'll do another stream in a couple days if anybody's interested. I'll put the replay of this on YouTube if anybody wants to go back and watch me be excited about nothing for a long, long time. And I hope folks have enjoyed this, or at least it distracted them or something. Yeah, Chris Reed says, if anybody has any questions, let me know now, and I can finish this off with some Q&A. Chris Reed says, having quasars in the Milky Way is at least consistent with Wing Commander 3. I think the same thing, but I kind of wonder if the idea isn't more that quasars are far out from the Milky Way still, but because of this universe of anti-gravitons that's like a sheet that has places closer together based on their gravity, I wonder if their extreme gravity just draws things closer to them more quickly, and that's why a quasar is a special long jump, which we also see on Commander Academy. Anyway, long story short, I do hope to do more streaming, more Wing Commander stuff. I want to bring back All Wings Considered and do other shows. It's one of those the mind is willing but the flesh is weak things. So I hope you guys had fun, and we'll do it again. We'll play an actual game. We'll do more stuff. I wanna get back out there and do Wing Commander stuff again because that's really what I love. And Allie and I are gonna do some streams too where we'll play less 1990s games. But thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate. I appreciate you guys always. It's good to have Wing Commander friends, and it's good to have friends in general. And, there are a lot of good folks out there. All right, I'll sign off now. Thank you so much. Have a great day. I'll see you out there. And bring your handbook next time. We'll talk about top secret material. All right, bye.